Good evening, students. I hope all of you are safe and sound. Welcome to this part 2 of the open session on GS4, where we are discussing the 2021 Civil Services GS4 question paper. Friends, in the last part, we have already covered the theoretical portion, and today we will take a look at the case studies that were asked this year in the mains written examination. But before I proceed further, let me highlight the modus operandi that we will be following in this class. I will take one case study at a time and I will discuss it at length. And once I am done with that discussion, I will open the floor for your questions. But friends, because we have paucity of time, please limit your questions to the case study that I have just discussed or will be discussing. Do not ask general questions, otherwise we'll not be able to cover all the case studies within the time limit that we have at our hands. But do not get disappointed. At the end of all the case studies, I will open the floor one more time for entertaining your general questions in and around case study answer writing. You can also ask any other question related to GS paper 4 or the paper on ethics, integrity and aptitude. So without further ado, let's get started and let's pick the first case study of the day. So the first case study is actually the question number 7, and it goes something like this. It says, Sunil is a young civil servant and has a reputation for his competence, integrity, dedication and relentless pursuit of difficult and onerous jobs. Now, just by the opening line of this case study, we understand that our protagonist has been introduced to us. And who is the protagonist or who is the main core entity in this case study? It is this person called Sunil, who is a young civil servant and who has an excellent reputation. Why? Because he is reflecting or adhering to some of the core fundamental values of civil services. And what are these values? Like, say, for example, competence, integrity, dedication. Dedication here is actually short for dedication to public services, and relentless pursuit of difficult and onerous jobs. It is nothing but perseverance. And remember, friends, that this question paper has a specific question on perseverance. Anyhow, further, the case study goes as, considering his profile, it means these attributes, he was picked up by his bosses, it means superiors, to handle a very challenging and sensitive assignment. So now the actual challenge is about to be introduced in the case study. He was posted in a tribal-dominated district notorious for illegal sand mining. Excavating sand from river belt and transporting through trucks and selling them in black market was rampant. This illegal sand mining mafia was operating with the support of local functionaries and tribal musclemen, who in turn were bribing selected poor tribals and had kept the tribals under fear and intimidation. Sunil, being a sharp and energetic officer, immediately grasped the ground realities and the modus operandi or the method followed by the mafia through their devious and dubious mechanism. It means through their treacherous and through their surreptitious measures. On making enquiries, he gathered that some of their own office employees are in hand and glove with them and have developed close, unholy nexus. So here we can understand that there is some sort of unholy nexus between administration and the mafia, or some members of the administration and the mafia, to be more precise. Sunil initiated stringent action against them and started conducting raids on their illegal operations of movement of trucks filled with sand. The mafia got rattled, as not many officers in the past had taken such strong steps against the mafia. Some of the office employees who were allegedly close to mafia informed them that the officer is determined to clean up the mafia's illegal sand mining operations in that district and may cause them irreparable damage. So the mafia was informed by his henchmen who were working in the administration, though were actually colluding with the mafia, that the officer, in our case Sunil, is hell-bent. He is about to eradicate the mafia for once and all, and that's why they will not find themselves in a position to again set up their illegal operations. That is what is meant here by irreparable damage. The mafia turned hostile and launched counteroffensive. The tribal Musselmen and mafia started threatening him with dire consequences. His family, wife, and old mother were stalked and were under virtual surveillance, and thus causing mental torture, agony, and stress to all of them. The matter assumed serious proportions when a Musselman came to his office and threatened him to stop raids, etc. Otherwise, his fate will not be different than some of his predecessors. And see, this case gave us a crude indication of some previous case by writing few words within a bracket. It says that 10 years back, one officer was killed by the mafia. Now, friends, before I go into the details of this case, I want to highlight few important things. First, this year, if you look at the case studies, you will find that the case studies were not so difficult. They were of moderate difficulty, but they were excessively lengthy in case of some of the case studies. And this is a deliberate exercise which UPSC does with some objective in mind. And the objective is to create panic in you when you are trying to attempt these case studies. Because the moment you read lengthy case studies, you know that you are challenging your own concentration and retention ability of mind, which is very important for being a civil servant. That's why when we were doing the case studies in the class, I already told the students that be prepared for lengthy case studies, because lengthy case studies are often thrown to test the patience, comprehension, and the ability to retain the facts in the examination hall. So this case study also falls into that category. The case study as such is not very difficult, but because of its length and because of the facts that have been pushed into these case study and the various angles, the case study appears to be difficult, but it is not actually difficult. But I'm under the assumption that you have prepared well, and only then you would not find any difficulty in these kind of case studies when you are encountering them in the examination hall. पर अगर आपकी प्रिपरेशन आधी अधूरी है, आपने केस स्टडी कभी लिखा नहीं है, तो फिर कोई सिंपल सा भी केस स्टडी आ जाए, still you are going to face enormous challenge in the examination hall. So let us take a look at the questions which are associated with this case study. So the questions are, first, identify the different options available to Sunil in attending to this situation. Critically evaluate each of the options listed by you. And third, which of the above do you think would be the most appropriate for Sunil to adopt and why? Now, if I break down these questions, what UPSC is trying to ask through this case study is that if Sunil faces this kind of a situation as it is highlighted in the case study, then what are the different options which are available to Sunil? And then you must evaluate the merits and demerits of all such options. Then you should recommend the most appropriate option that Sunil should follow. It means you should recommend the actual course of action, and you must give justifications for your choice. Remember, friends, ethical justification is a very important component while you are closing your case study arguments. If your case study arguments lack these ethical justifications, then the arguments will not carry enough weight. That is where the fifth unit, or the unit on moral thinkers and philosophers, become very critical as far as the case study part of GS paper 4 is concerned. So, how we should approach this case study? First, let us highlight the facts of the case that we have. So first, try to identify the facts of the case. Now see friends, it is not necessary that you highlight the facts of the case in your answer sheet, but at least you should identify the facts before you actually commence your answer writing. Now what are the facts? In very simple words, the facts are there is a young civil servant called Sunil who is very efficient, or you can say who is professionally and ethically competent. One who is professionally and ethically competent. That is the characteristic of Sunil. Now, you see that Sunil is posted in a district where there is a substantial tribal population. And you see that this district is notorious for illegal sand mining. Illegal sand mining is rampant in that district. And this illegal sand mining, it occurs due to the unholy nexus that exists between the sand mafia and some members of the administration. It means there is an unholy nexus between the members of the bureaucracy and the sand mafia, who is otherwise a criminal. Sand mafia also has created a kind of collusive bond with some tribal musclemen and some local functionaries. Like say for example, members of the local bodies or something like that. So the sand mafia, who has built an alliance with some of the members of the administration, some tribal musclemen and local functionaries, is indiscriminately exploiting sand from the riverbed. So you can understand that already there is an ecological question also surfacing at this point. Now, Sunil, who is professionally and ethically competent, soon understands the ground situation and starts taking action against this sand mafia. But the sand mafia gets rattled and launches a counter-offensive, a counter-operation on Sunil. And what actually the sand mafia does is that the sand mafia tries to threaten Sunil so that he stops his operations against the sand mafia, because he is now continuing the raids wherein he is trying to stop this illegal sand mining. And the sand mafia also does stalking and surveillance of Sunil's family. Sunil's family, here at least in the case it is indicated, include two other members apart from Sunil. They are Sunil's mother, old mother, and wife. See, never make assumptions which are not highlighted in the case study. So here, the case study clearly highlights that there are two members of the family, at least, who are being harassed by this sand mafia. They are stalking the old mother and the wife, and they are also doing a kind of virtual surveillance. Do you understand that? So this is actually the case. So Sunil, a professionally and ethically competent officer, is posted in a district which has substantial tribal population and is notorious for illegal sand mining because the sand mafia has formed an unholy nexus with some of the members of the administration, some tribal musclemen, and local functionaries. Sunil understands all of this, launches an offensive on the illegal sand mining, but the sand mafia launches a counter-offensive and starts threatening Sunil and his family members. So these are the facts of the case. Now, let us try to understand that who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders in this case. Stakeholders simply mean the parties which have interest in the case or its outcome if there is a decision making in question, or whose rights are related to the case, or others who might get affected in any one way from the outcome that you will choose. They become the stakeholders of the case, or the different parties who have interest or who get affected due to the matters that are covered in that case study. Now see friends, stakeholders could be divided into generic stakeholders and specific stakeholders. Specific stakeholders are simply those stakeholders whose names are directly mentioned in the case study, whereas generic stakeholders are those stakeholders who have an indirect association with the matter that is covered in the case study. We can also call them as primary stakeholders for specific stakeholders and the secondary, tertiary, or quaternary stakeholders. But do not get into such kind of hierarchical arrangement of stakeholders. First, it would be time consuming, and secondly, you might not be able to entertain all the case stakeholders while you are writing your case study answer. So one way is to just highlight the stakeholders without differentiating them as primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, etc. Simply write the stakeholders, and my suggestion would be that do not go beyond 8 stakeholders, at maximum 10, but do not breach that 10 stakeholder number limit. Why? Because otherwise the stakeholders will become so much that you would get confused while you are writing your answer. So if we look at this case, who are the stakeholders? First, Sunil would be a primary stakeholder. Then members of Sunil's family. Now, because the case study mentions it, so you can very rightly conclude mother and wife. Then think of the district administration. Include both the general administration as well as the police administration. Then the people of the district, and here you should lay some special emphasis on the tribals, because it's a tribal dominated district which has rich deposits of sand. Because if you look at India's geography, you will find that those areas which are rich in minerals are coincidentally those areas which have healthy tribal population. So social justice, tribal rights are always involved whenever we are talking about resource exploitation. In fact, this is illegal exploitation of resources. This is amounting to resource stealing. So, especially on the tribals, then you can think of the state government. It is an important stakeholder, and the central government, they also become stakeholders. State government, perhaps a direct stakeholder, central government, a generic stakeholder, because it's a law and order situation, and you know that law and order is mostly a state subject. Then we can also include some other stakeholders in this. The other stakeholders that we can think of are the members of Sunil's office. Now look here, friends, that some people, while they write these stakeholders, they include some entities which are mentioned in the case as stakeholders who are actually not. Like, what do I mean by that? Say for example, कुछ लोग ऐसा करते हैं कि सैंड माफिया को भी एक स्टेक होल्डर बना देंगे. ये गलती आप मत करना, because those who are indulging into illegal activities, how they become stakeholders. But because some people are in an unholy nexus with the sand mafia, that's why you see that other members of Sunil's office do have an interest in the outcome of this case. Clear? Then you can also think of other stakeholders like business community, because the business community must be watching Sunil with all the enthusiasm and eagerness that how the law and order situation is in the district. That will create positive business sentiments. And because the case also mentions about some local functionaries, that's why we can also include the local bodies as our stakeholder. So let us summarize the stakeholders. We can go for more stakeholders, but this would be sufficient. Sunil, Sunil's family, the district administration, general and police administration, people of the district, especially the tribals, state government, central government, members of Sunil's office, business community, and local bodies. Now, the questions that are attached to this case study are, what are the different options available to Sunil? Evaluate all those options, look into the merits and demerits of all such options, and then choose the most appropriate option giving justification. But before we do that, friends, we must highlight the ethical responsibilities of a civil servant under this situation. So that should be the third thing that we should try to consider with respect to this case. So the third thing is the ethical responsibilities of a civil servant under such circumstances, or the general circumstances also would warrant more or less the same ethical responsibilities. Now, what are these ethical responsibilities? First, a civil servant is a guardian of public trust. Civil servants are guardians of public trust. So they are the guardians of public trust. Now, what do we mean by guardian? Guardian simply means the protector. And public trust is that faith which people have placed in the administration, that the administration will function and perform its actions in the interest of the people. So all public servants, all civil servants are guardians of public trust. That's an ethical responsibility. The second ethical responsibility of a civil servant is he is the custodian of common resources. Now, these resources could be natural resources or financial resources. And here, in this case, you see that it is more of natural resources. Natural resources like sand or any other mineral. Financial resources like funds that are there at the disposal of the civil servants, which they are to use for different programs, schemes, projects, etc. Resources could also be human resources, because all those who are working in the district administration are working for the people. So they are all human resources who are needed for the delivery of social justice. Civil servants are also the promoters of public interest. Now, what is public interest? Public interest simply means the common good. So you know that one major maxim of public administration is the maxim of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism says maximum good for the maximum number, and public interest mostly, or in very general terms, we can say that public interest is the promotion of the common good or common interests of the society. Clear? The civil servants are also the defenders of civil liberties or rights of the people. And here you see that the rights of the tribals, at least, are clearly infringed. And what about the rights of those sand miners who are mining sand legally? Is this not an unfair competition then and breach of the social contract? So keep that also in mind. The civil servants are also the deliverers of social justice. And here you see that there is clear violation of socio-economic justice. The civil servants are also, you would see, they are the people who are responsible for the maintenance, or they are the maintainers of public order. So here, in this case, if we take a look at the responsibilities of Sunil, we will find that all these responsibilities would be binding on Sunil as well. Sunil is a guardian of public trust. He is a custodian of common resources. He is a promoter of public interest. He is a defender of civil liberties and rights of the people. He is a deliverer of social justice, and he is a person responsible for maintenance of public order. So these are the ethical responsibilities that we should keep in mind while we are trying to identify the different options that Sunil should choose from. Then let us talk about the different values which are there in this case, or the ethical values that we can identify in this case. First is professional integrity. That's a very important value. Then impartiality. Because if one party is allowed to do illegal sand mining, that is partial way of operating the system. Therefore, others who are equally entitled to mine sand in a legal way, their rights are jeopardized and their contracts are breached outrightly. Then the value that is required here is fortitude. Fortitude is nothing but courage. Because you see, it's a clear case of intimidation. The sand mafia is trying to rattle Sunil, and that's why Sunil requires fortitude, which some scholars believe is the most important value. And from this value, other values emanate, or this value acts as a cement which holds all other values. Then you see what is required is administrative prudence. Administrative prudence is nothing but administrative wisdom. विवेक चाहिए इस वक्त कि हम कैसे डील करें इस सिचुएशन से. Then the next value which is required is temperance. Temperance is nothing but self-control. You see that when the wife and the mother are threatened or Sunil is threatened, then he must exhibit emotional intelligence and he must therefore have this value of temperance. He must also have values like empathy and compassion, especially for the tribals who are vulnerable groups. Then you see, Sunil, apart from these values, Sunil would also require some qualities. So there are some responsibilities, there are some values, and there are some qualities that are required. Now, what are these qualities? First, Sunil should have an innovative approach. He should have the ability of critical thinking. He should have the ability to handle stress, personal and professional. He should be a good decision maker. And he should stick to the rule of law. So these are some of the qualities which Sunil would be requiring at this point. You can include some other ancillary values as well. Ancillary values would be responsibility, objectivity, accountability, etc. So these are the values which would be required, and these are the qualities that Sunil should possess if he is to come to a solution as far as this problem is concerned. Now, before we actually look at the options, let us also take a look at the different ethical dilemmas that Sunil will be facing. The first ethical dilemma would be self-preservation versus professional integrity. Now, what do we mean by this? Self-preservation means the right to preserve your body property. That is what is self-preservation. In fact, you see that in the libertarian school of moral philosophy, a lot of emphasis is given on self-preservation, and self-preservation is not bad. Self-preservation is simply taking care of the self and not throwing the self into any kind of trouble or situation which can create some sort of disruption in the life of the self. That is self-preservation. Professional integrity, on the other hand, is adherence to a set of values which define the professional ethics or which define the ethics of that profession. So you can have professional integrity in sports, professional integrity in administration, professional integrity in medical care, etc. So here, professional integrity mostly relates to the integrity of administration or civil services integrity. Second ethical dilemma would be protection of the family versus upholding the rule of law and principle of justice. This would be the second ethical dilemma that Sunil would be facing. The third ethical dilemma which Sunil would be facing would include personal interest versus public interest. And in this question paper itself, do you remember, friends, that there was a question which says that domain knowledge, creativity, innovative thinking can help in the resolution of ethical dilemmas. Here you see that when it comes to self-preservation versus professional integrity, though both these values are important, but professional integrity should not be compromised. This should be given preference as far as self-preservation is concerned. Then when it comes to protection of the family or upholding the rule of law and principles of justice, here you see there is a dialect clash between two duties, the duty towards the family and duty towards the country or duty towards the people. As a servant of the people or as a public servant, you should always place public interest above personal interest. But you should not completely undermine personal interest, but you should give preference to public interest. Well, that is the ethical oath that civil servants take when they join these services. Do you understand that? So in that way, you can say that here also public interest should be given preference and upholding the rule of law and principle of justice should be given preference over the other choices in these ethical dilemmas. So these are the ethical dilemmas that Sunil is facing at this moment. Now let us look at the different options. अब देखो ऐसे सिचुएशन जब भी होते हैं तो वहां पे चार तरह के ऑप्शंस आप क्रिएट कर सकते हो. फर्स्ट ऑप्शन would be ignore the threat and continue the raids on illegal sand mining. That would be the first option that is available. Second option that is available is stop the raids on the sand mafia. It means you are rattled by the intimidation. Obviously, prima facie itself, it appears that this cannot be the right choice of action. The third option that you would have under such circumstances is, if you are Sunil, suppose, then you can apply for an extended leave seeking health or other personal reasons, or you can seek a transfer. Again, you can understand that this showcases more or less an escapist attitude. We will check the merits and demerits of all such options. Don't worry about it in a moment. And the fourth option would be to ensure the protection of the family, systematically identify the errors and take appropriate actions as per law and ethics. Now, let us look at all these options one by one. First, ignore the threat and continue the raids. Now, what would be the merits of this kind of a choice? First, obviously, Sunil will no longer be harassed by the tribal musclemen or other goons of the sand mafia. Sunil will be able to complete his tenure. No, sorry, I took the merits for this options maybe. So if we look at this option first, if we look at this, stop the raids, then what would be the merits? The merits would be, first, there would be no further harassment. Sunil will not be harassed by the sand mafia, the tribal musclemen, or any other goon of the sand mafia. There would be no intimidation. Sunil would be able to complete his tenure with peace. So these are the merits when you opt for this option. We are discussing the option B first, right? So if he stopped the raids, then these would be the merits. No further harassment, no unwarranted aggression, no intimidation, protection of the family members, completion of his term with peace. But what would be the demerits? If we look at the demerits would be, first, compromise with the foundational values of the civil services, like fortitude, professional integrity, impartiality, justice, accountability, responsibility. These are all foundational values. So there would be clear compromise with those values. There would be breach of public trust. Sunil would be breaching the public trust or the faith which the people has placed in him and in the administration. It would also give an encouragement to the illegal sand mining in the district. It would violate the rights of the tribal people. Because you know, in a democracy, the people are the real owners of the common resources, and the public servants are only the custodians of the public resources or the common resources. Then it would also encourage the unholy nexus that prevails between the mafia and the administrators. So you see that these would be the demerits, whereas these would be the merits. The merits are all personal interest related, whereas the demerits are all public interest related. There would be gross violation of administrative ethics if this is chosen as an action, because the demerits are much more in weight than the merits. That's why this cannot be the appropriate action. Let us take a look at this action, action number A now. Ignore the threat and continue the raids. Obviously, here what was demerit in option number 2 would convert into merit in option number 1. Obviously, there would be no compromise with the foundational values, there would be upholding of public interest, there would be discouragement to illegal mining, there would be a direct attack on corruption, there would be no violation of the rights of the tribal people. These would be the merits as far as this option is concerned. But what would be the demerits? इसमें जो merit था वो हो जाएगा इसका demerit. Like say for example, there would be further harassment which Sunil may have to face. There could be more intimidation, there could be more unwarranted aggression, there could be danger to Sunil's wife's life and mother's life. Sunil may also have to face death threats. There would be continuous disturbance in his working pattern, and those who are hand in glove with the mafia and who are working in the administration, they would continuously prepare some sort of road blockages for Sunil. That's why you see that there are many demerits here as well. But again, if we compare these two options, option number A to option number B, any day you see that option number A appears to be more appropriate But is it the most appropriate? Well, for that we have to look at the other options as well. If we look at this option, apply for an extended leave on the grounds of health or any other personal ground, or seek a transfer. Now the merits of this is, again, you would be avoiding confrontation with the mafia, and Sunil can work peacefully in the new assignment, whatever is assigned to him, his new duty, his new role. Also you see that the safety and security of his mother and wife will be ensured. So these would be the merits. The demerits are, first, escapist attitude. A civil servant should never have an escapist attitude. ये भागने जैसा होगा. It would be surrender of public trust in front of surreptitious elements. Or in other words, you can say there would be lack of leadership quality, lack of responsibility, lack of dedication to public services, gross violation of the rights of the tribal people, gross injustice to those who are indulging into legal sand mining, and it would be encouragement to corruption and illegal sand mining. It would also give an impetus to the mafia culture. The mafia would feel emboldened by this transfer or this extended leave, and they would understand that they can use the threat as an element to intimidate future officers as well. So it would create a culture of muscle power in the district. So these are the demerits when associated with this option. So apply for an extended leave or seek a transfer is definitely not an appropriate course of action. B and C cannot be opted. As far as these three options, A looks most appropriate, but is it the most appropriate when we consider all the options? Let's take a look at that as well. Option D says ensure protection of the family, systematically identify the errors in the system, and then take appropriate actions as per law and ethics. Obviously, you see that this action appears to be more effective than the first option, because the first option, like the second option, are extremes. And you know, by Aristotelian golden mean and by Buddha's Madhyam Marga, we must avoid extremes or extremity. Here you see that when Sunil stopped the raids, on one hand, he promotes personal interest and he ensures the safety and security of his family. But on the other hand, he causes a complete destruction of the public interest. So this is an extreme. Similarly, if you see that when Sunil ignored the threat and continue the raids, there he is able to protect the public interest, but he fails to protect the personal interest, and his duty towards his mother and his wife is compromised. Do you understand that? Now, what is ensure the protection of the family? How can Sunil do that? First, Sunil can ask for a police protection. He can write to the superiors about what is the situation in the district. He can also write to the chief minister, the cabinet secretary, the chief secretary, the prime minister also, if need arises, that this is how the situation is and there is a continuous threat. Then he should form dedicated teams of expert and talented and courageous officers. Then he must strengthen the vigilance mechanism. He should work on intelligence and tip-offs. He should continue raiding the mafia, and then he should create charge sheets and initiate proceedings against the mafia as per the law and as per administrative ethics. Now, what would be the merits if Sunil does that? The merits would be obviously all the merits that you would be getting in this case when you continue the raids, all the merits plus the merit of protection of the members of the family and also fulfilling the duty of a good husband and a good son. So you can understand these would be the merits that would be associated with this fourth option. The demerit would be, obviously this could be a time consuming process, and when Sunil may apply for say, police protection, then family members could raise a protest. They may feel intimidated by the protection and they may try to persuade Sunil to leave this project and move to a new district or apply for transfer or leave. This is where Sunil must utilize his emotional intelligence. This is where the value of temperance that we discussed becomes very crucial. Do you understand that, friends? So these are the four options. The four options are stop the raids, continue the raids, ignoring the threat. Third, apply for extended leave or seek a transfer. And fourth, ensure the protection of the family. Systematically identify the errors. Take appropriate action as per law and administrative ethics. Now see, friends, that we must also try to justify our action, because the question also says that why these actions must be taken or why you are choosing this appropriate course of action. So if we look at the justifications, you can justify your answer in two ways. First, on the basis of facts that are presented in the case study, and second, on the basis of moral principles or on the basis of moral thoughts. Here is where the role of scholars and thinkers come into the picture. देखो, on the basis of facts में क्या होगा? First, you see that it would further strengthen the image of Sunil as a competent officer, because he has not chickened out, he is not escaping, he is not taking any extreme action. Rather, he is showing intelligence, temperance, integrity, and all the other foundational values. So this will add to the professional profile of Sunil. Second, it would ensure the protection of his family. This would also ensure the promotion of the public trust. It means it would also be a step which would help Sunil to carry all the ethical responsibilities that we discussed, like the civil servant is guardian of the public trust, custodian of the common resources, etc., protector of the social justice, deliverer of rights, and all of that, right? So these all things could be used to justify your course of action. Further, you see, this would discourage illegal sand mining and other kind of mafia culture. This would also break the unholy nexus, because you see, when Sunil would be looking into the entire event and he would be forming dedicated teams, he must also form some committees, inquiry commissions to look into who are the people in the administration who sabotage the efforts of the administration in fighting the mafia. And this he can do by strengthening the intelligence operation, the vigilance operations, etc. So keep this thing also in mind. Now, when it comes to moral principles, then on what ethical grounds we can defend it? First, the contractarian ethics. Now, contractarian ethics simply says that ethical principles flow out of the social contract, and a social contract is one which people mutually decide upon. India's social contract is its constitution, and the administration and the government is the defender of that contract. So you see, when Sunil protects the public interest and promotes the public trust, then you see he fulfills his duties which flow from the contractarian form of ethics, or he lives up to the promises which are made in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Then, if we look at this situation from the deontological perspective, the deontological perspective of Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant has given a principle of categorical imperative, wherein he says that we should never treat anyone as a means to achieve an end. That's one thing. And second, we should never do any action which if becomes a universal law, we are going to have a problem with it. Now look here, if we look at the categorical imperative, and if we apply that the categorical imperative in this case, we see that if Sunil gives an exemption or he gives into the demands of the sand mafia, if this becomes a country-wide norm, then would we be as a society comfortable with it? Are we comfortable if this sand mining becomes illegal sand mining becomes a universal law throughout the country? Obviously will not be. That's why it is violating the categorical imperative. Again, you see that the tribals who are being bribed, who are being coerced, intimidated, etc., they are all being used as means to achieve some surreptitious, illicit economic imperatives. Here in this case, gains by doing illegal sand mining. And also, if we look at it from the Aristotelian golden mean principle, then you see that ignoring the threats and continuing the raids as well as stopping the raids, they both are extreme. And you know, at the extreme lies the vices, whereas the virtues are always at the central point. The central point would be first ensure the safety of the family, then systematically study the issue, break the entire nexus, form teams, conduct the raids, arrest the people, then make charge sheets, initiate criminal proceedings, and book the people under law. Let the heavy hand of justice fall on everyone who is violating the social contract, because the contract says that everybody should get fair opportunity in doing business, and here those who are doing illegal mining are taking advantage of the contract, or they are trying to undermine the contract, they are trying to subvert the contract, and obviously it is clear violation of the Constitution of India. And as a public servant, you should never tolerate the undermining of the Constitution of India. So either you can defend your answer on the basis of the facts that are given in the case study, or you can highlight some of the moral principles or moral thoughts on the basis of which you can further defend your action. So here, when you look at from the social contractarian ethical perspective or the deontological ethical perspective of Immanuel Kant, the universal law principle or the law of humanity, or when you look at from the Aristotelian golden mean principle, you can defend your choice, the fourth choice that we discussed. So that is what is all about this case study. Now friends, I open the floor for your questions around this case study. Okay. Dilshad Beg asks, sir, can we have a common thumb rule for solving maximum of same kind of case studies? Yes, Dilshad, I will discuss that rule at the fag end of this class, so please be patient, dear. Anup asks, okay, Anup is giving a kind of response to Dilshad. Heather says, how many of you solved the, okay, so there's again a general question. Okay, so it seems that there are no direct questions as far as this case study is concerned. So let us move to case study number 8, or which is the second case study for us. So how does this case study go about? So it says, you are vice principal of a degree college in one of the middle class towns. Principal has recently retired and management is looking for his replacement. There are also feelers, it means indications or informal indications that the management may promote you as principal. In the meantime, during the annual examination, the flying squad which came from the university caught 2 students red-handed involving in unfair means. A senior lecturer of the college was personally helping these students in this act. This senior lecturer also happens to be close to the management. One of the students was son of a local politician who was responsible in getting college affiliated to the present reputed university. The second student was son of a local businessman who has donated maximum funds for running of the college. You immediately informed the management regarding this unfortunate incident. The management told you to resolve the issue with flying squad at any cost. They further said that such incident will not only tarnish the image of the college, but also the politician and the businessman are very important personalities for the functioning of the college. You were also given hint that your further promotion to principal depends on your capability in resolving this issue with flying squad. In the meantime, you were intimated by your administrative officer that certain members of the student union are protesting outside the college gate against the senior lecturer and the students involved in this incident and demanding strict action against the defaulters. Now, what are the questions which are associated with this case study? Discuss the ethical issues involved in the case. Critically examine the options available with you as vice principal. What option will you adopt and why? So this is also more or less, you see, a repetition of the kind that we just encountered in the form of case study number 7. So if we look at case study number 8, then we see that it moves more or less on the same lines as the case study number 7. Here also we have to first highlight the ethical issues, which was otherwise not mentioned in case study number 7, but yet we did. So here it is explicitly mentioned, so we have to identify the ethical issues, and secondly we have to identify the different options that are available, evaluate those options and choose the most appropriate option and give ethical justification for that. So you see a kind or a caricature which we just encountered in case study number 7. So if we look at case study number 8, let's start with the facts of the case. So if we look at the facts of the case, the facts are such that you are the vice principal and you are to be promoted to the post of principal very soon. There are crude informal indications of that because the principal has just retired. You also see that what has happened in the college is that the annual examination is going on and the flying squad which is visiting the college, which is from the university, it has caught 2 students red-handed in doing malpractices, or they were cheating perhaps, and they were supported by a teacher or a lecturer in the college who also happens to be close to the management. Now this is a grave situation. The management calls you and asks you to handle this situation. The situation is grave because these 2 students who have been caught, one of them is a son of a famous politician who has helped the college in getting accreditation or affiliation under the present university, and the other student is a son of a famous businessman who has donated liberally for the college. Or you see that this money is important for the financial sustainability of the institute, and this accreditation is important for getting the prestige in the eyes of the prospective and present students and their guardians. Clear? Now, you see that what is the direction that the management has given you? The management has given you this direction, that resolve the matter. Resolve this matter at any cost. That is what the direction is, because it is going to tarnish the image of the college. That's one thing. And second, you see that it will destroy the relationships that the college has with the politician, and the businessman, both of whom are at this juncture important for continuation of financial operation and for gaining affiliation or continuation of affiliation, or at least for gaining further advantages or for further usage as far as university work is concerned. But in the meantime, what has happened is that the administrator of your institute, you are the vice principal, informs you that some student unions or group of students, they are protesting outside the gate of the institution and they want strong action against the lecturer who was aiding the malpractice and the students who were indulged into the malpractice. The management tells you that how effectively you handle this case would actually determine that whether you will have any career progression or not. Or in other words, whether you will become the next principal or not depends upon how do you handle this case. These are the facts of the case. Now, let us take a look at the stakeholders. Who would be the stakeholders in this case? Obviously, first, because the case study says you are the vice principal, that's why you can write I, the vice principal. Then students of the institution, college, then the college administration, then the politician, because he is an important entity who has helped the college in getting affiliation and accreditation, the businessman, because he has contributed to the college funds, then the society at large, the university administration, especially the exam operation department, and you see the flying squad. The members of the flying squad, they would all become the stakeholders. When you include college administration, you can also add to this the teachers in the college. Now, they are the stakeholders as far as this case is concerned. Now, if we look at that, what are the ethical issues involved in this case, because that's the first question, the ethical issues involved in this case. So the ethical issues that we can think of is first, the duty of the college to conduct fair and impartial examination. That's the first ethical issue in this case. The second ethical issue is the rights of the students to take a fair examination which is being conducted in an impartial manner. So you can see the same thing, one from the duty angle and the other way from the rights angle. So it is duty of the college, whereas on the other hand, it is the rights of the students. They are nothing but two sides of the same coin. Then, if we look at other ethical issues, then it would be your moral strength to withstand three things: allurement, inducement, and coercion. In other words, you can say that this would be a test of conscience, or this would be a situation where you see there would be a crisis of conscience which would be facing you, and you have to come to a right conclusion. The next ethical issue that we can see here is due process, impartiality in decision making. And we can see the next ethical issue as the adherence to the values promoted by educational institutions. So these are the ethical issues that we can think of as far as this case is concerned. देखो, पहला, the duty of the college to conduct fair and impartial examination. Second, rights of the student to take a fair and impartial examination which is free from malpractices. Third, the moral strength of the vice principal to withstand allurement, inducement, and coercion. Then due process because you know that the flying squad has caught someone red-handed, and now there must be a set of guidelines that has to be followed. That is due process. So the due process, impartiality in decision making. What if this happened to some other student who is not the politician's son or the businessman's son, then whether the application of the action would have been same. So that is more of impartiality in decision making. Professional integrity, you can add that as well. Adherence to the values that are promoted by the educational institution. See, you know that society, family, and educational institutions, they play a pivotal role in the development of the value set of an individual. That's why you see that these values which are preached by the educational institution, this is the time when the educational institution should walk the talk, or the vice principal who is about to lead the institution in the coming future must exhibit those values in his actions so that he acts like a moral exemplar to all the other and creates a demonstration effect. Do you understand this? Now, you also see that there would be some ethical dilemmas here in this question. The first is career progression, or the possibilities of becoming the next principal versus professional integrity. Professional integrity means that you should never compromise with the values which are required for performing your duties in that profession. This is what is your professional integrity. That's the first ethical dilemma. The second ethical dilemma would be the rights of the student, because there are some students who have not cheated, especially those who are protesting perhaps. So their rights versus image of the institution. That's an important thing, because you see, if the image of the institution is tarnished, then going forward it would become very difficult to gain the acceptance in the eyes of future students. Then third ethical dilemma is financial sustainability versus due process, that whether you will go for the financial sustainability, or you can say financial plus operational sustainability, because university is giving affiliation, versus due process, that whether you will allow the law to take its own course, or whether you will allow the set processes which are established by the university, the exam department, and the exam operations department, whether those things will actually take place here or not, or whether we are going to see some sort of partiality as far as these two students are concerned. As far as this is concerned, again, you see professional integrity should be given primacy. Rights of the student and image of the institution, well, again, these are very close to each other, because the image of the institution will have a direct impact on the credibility of the degree of the students. And what about those students who have not cheated? When they would go in the industry and fight for jobs, they must not be seen with contempt, or people should not raise aspersions that whether their degree is actually a legitimate degree, where there is any credibility around that degree, or they are also the products of some sort of malpractices. So you understand that there is a kind of close competition between these two values. Obviously, you see, if the rights of the students are upheld, then in the long run, the image of the institution would be protected. So you must have that deeper understanding, and you will choose this in this case. And in this case, if you see financial sustainability versus due process, again, due process will have a long-term positive implication on the functioning of the college, whereas financial sustainability and operational sustainability, suppose this thing breaks out further in the media, or suppose the protests grow and the media gains attention of it and starts unearthing the issue, and suppose there is a high level inquiry committee set up by, say, the High Court or any judicial wing of the government, then everything would be unearthed. What about the reputation of the college then? And what about the financial sustainability? Obviously, the affiliation would be destroyed and the affiliation would be dropped in no time if this thing comes to light, that the college administration was trying to shield some of the problematic issues that happened in the college, right? Now, let us try to answer the second question, that which are the options which are available to us at this moment. The first option is what the management says. It is settlement of the issue with the flying squad at all costs, because that is what the case study clearly highlights, कि चाहे जो भी लगे इस चीज को सेटल कर दो. यही कह रहे हैं वाइस प्रिंसिपल से जो आप हो इस केस में, because the case asks you to imagine that. Then second is express inability to the management regarding the handling of the issue. It means, again, you see a kind of escapist attitude. C is cooperate with the flying squad, give an assurance to the protesting students that justice would be served, allow the due process to take place, and uphold the examination guidelines provided by the college and the university. ये तीन options हैं primarily. Before you, if you are the vice principal, these are the options which are available. Now, first, let us look at this thing. Settlement of the issue with the flying squad at all costs. Now, what could be the costs? One cost could be, like, say, for example, offering some money or any other kind of advantage for settling the issue. That could be one of the costs that could be paid by the college. The second could be an assurance that the students will be punished by the internal committee, exam committee, and according to the rules of the college. So the flying squad should not take any action on the students. So this is the first way of settling the issue. Now you see, obviously, settling the issue at all costs means that even at the cost of undermining the due process. Obviously, what would be the merits here? The first merit would be that it would protect the image of the college. It would not tarnish the image of the college. It would protect the future of the two students, because you know a stringent action can cause the blacklisting of these students depending upon the gravity of their malpractice and the importance of the examination. The other merit could be that it would help the vice principal in his career progression. The demerits would be, first, it would be gross injustice with those who have taken the examination seriously. Second, it would be violation of the due process. Third, it would be making a mockery of the exam guidelines made by the university and the college. Then it would promote a culture of cheating in the college. It would be a bad precedent for all those who are willing to indulge into such kind of malpractices. And you see that a greater demerit that we must consider here is that the student protests may escalate. If the student protests escalate, then that can tarnish the image of the college in the long run. So there are so many demerits associated with this action. Hence, this cannot be followed. The second is express inability to the management. First, obviously, the merit would be that you would be avoiding any confrontation with the politician, with the management, and with the businessman. Further, you see that your chances of further career progression might take a hit in the short run, but in the long run, because you have not damaged to the image of the institution, you might be reconsidered. So there can be a long-term reconsideration on the cards here. But you see that the demerits that you would count here is that obviously there could be an escalation of the crisis. Second, this can create an entire chaos in the institution, in the campus, which may hurt the interests of the serious exam takers. This may hurt the career prospects of several students. This would promote the culture of escapism. This would promote the culture of lack of leadership. You would be showing lack of responsibility, lack of accountability, and you would lack the, or you would be compromising with the professional integrity. And professional integrity says that if there is a crisis, you should withstand that crisis and stick to your value set. You would also be downplaying the virtues that are necessary to be the leader of the institution or to be the principal of the institution, because you are to be considered, right? So definitely you are not a man for the crisis. That's why this also cannot be followed. If we look at this thing, first, cooperation with the flying squad. First, as the vice principal, what should you do? You should talk to the flying squad and you should ensure that due process will be followed, and you should give full cooperation to the flying squad in their operations. You should not act as a roadblock, rather you should be a facilitator. This will improve the confidence of the other students in the management. Then you should give an assurance to the protesting students that justice will be served and all those who are involved in the malpractices will be punished. Then you should form an internal committee and attach that committee with the flying squad, and you may also write to the university or you can telephone to the university and call for experts, third-party experts to come over and investigate the entire matter. Then you should allow the exam guidelines which are made by the university and the college to take its course, and according to the guidelines you must see that what punishments are due, but at the same time you have to show some sort of responsibility as well. And you see that there are chances that these students did this out of compulsion or due to ignorance, or because they were fear-stricken of the examination, or due to any other reason, or they were provoked, or they simply want to indulge into malpractices. But any action should not be such that goes beyond the evil that you are trying to curtail. So ask the Flying Squad and the university team and the college management to take actions which only seek to curtail the bad effects that are emanating from this exercise and should not affect the long-term prospects of the students. Everyone should get a second chance because the students have conducted a mistake, but this single mistake should not determine their entire future. Do you understand that? So you must give another opportunity to the students to compensate for their mistake. In this way, you would be fulfilling the duty of non-maleficence and the duty of beneficence. It means you would be acting like a benevolent leader. You would not be acting with malefied intent. Now, what could be the demerits of this? The demerits is it might destroy the public image of the institution. It might hurt your career growth. It might also act as a problem for financial sustainability or for the operational sustainability of the institution. So university affiliation, you know that the politician may come into the picture and do something, and the businessman can stop the funding if his son is to be punished. So there are possibilities, though they could also be good people. We should not assume that they are going to side with the immoral section. They might come to the rescue of the Flying Squad and the management, and they might say that take strict action. Obviously, you can understand that if this thing is done objectively and with showing ultimate adherence to the foundational values of civil services, then there would be hardly anyone who would be willing to go against it, at least in the public. That's why you see that this would put those who want to support this malpractice in a conundrum, in a quandary. They would not be able to protect the interests of those who have indulged into malpractice outrightly. The teacher who was involved in this, the internal committee should find out what was his motivation or what was the circumstances or which were the circumstances under which he conducted this action, what was his intention, and if there are other teachers also in the management or in the institution who are involved in this, and whether there is a quid pro quo kind of situation in it or not. So all of this should be highlighted, and according to the exam guidelines and the internal bodies of the university and the college, appropriate action should be taken. The merit of this would be, it might tarnish the image of the college or may bring bad publicity in the short run, but in the long run, it will improve the credibility of the institution. Second, you will not be guilty in the court of conscience because you have stuck to the professional integrity or you have stuck to the value system. Then you would also be fulfilling the duty of the administrator. This will also help in quelling down or trying to bring a kind of pacification into the student protest. Students may return to the classrooms, they may return to the examinations, the entire process might not get hit. Yes, there can be loss of financial support or affiliation, but if the institution stick to the path of morality, it can regain its affiliation and many people may come and contribute to the institution. The vice principal can also make a declaration that because of our strong stance against corruption, against malpractice, we are being targeted, and that's why we now urge from the people to do some sort of support to the institution so that the institution can continue its operation. You can also write to the education department, the Ministry of Education, the education minister and the education secretary about what has happened into the institution and how the affiliation has been abandoned and the flow of funds have been stopped. So in the long run, if you see, that it is more good for the institution. Clear? Now, if we look at its ethical justification, how can we justify this ethically? First, we can justify it from John Rawls' original position and wheel of ignorance. Now, what this American philosopher, who also happens to be a social contractarian, says that if we make the social contract by knowing our position in the society, we will always negotiate those rules which are benefiting us. Original position means that people are not aware who they are in the society. Under that circumstance, they would make fair rules. And this is achieved by the wheel of ignorance. Wheel of ignorance is an imagined device by John Rawls, so that you do not know what is your position in the society. Like, say, for example, if you say that people who live in the western part of India will only have to pay tax, and if you come to know that you live in the western part of India, you will not be willing to consider that offer. Under the wheel of ignorance, you see that you do not know who you are in the society beforehand. There is an ignorance, there is a wheel of ignorance around you. And that's why you always negotiate rules which are fair to everyone. So if this rule comes up that those who live in the western part of India will have to pay taxes, and if you are covered under the wheel of ignorance, you would never support this rule, because if the wheel is lifted and you happen to be one living in the western part of India, you will be the one who would be paying the taxes. Do you understand that? So if this rule comes up, you would summarily reject it. If the rule says that those whose income is beyond a threshold will pay taxes, you will agree to this rule. And if the wheel is lifted, if you are below the threshold level, obviously you are exempted from taxation. If you are above the level, then also you would be willing to pay taxes, because anyhow society is now placing you in a relatively privileged position. You are having a certain amount of income, so you can pay the taxes. So in that way you can defend this. If suppose that we consider these students, we already know their position, that one is politician's son, another one is businessman's son. That's why there are chances of partial decision making. But if we try to take the decision under a wheel of ignorance and we do not know who these two students are, our decision making would be objective, impartial and just in nature. So in that way you can defend the action that has to be adopted, our C choice. Then you can go for John Stuart Mill's rule utilitarianism. Now what is this rule utilitarianism? It says that we should always look for long-term and higher forms of pleasures. Now when action is taken against those who have indulged into the malpractice and due process is allowed to take its course, then in the long run it brings more credibility to the institution, and it also increases the prestige of the administration in the eyes of all and sundry. That's why you see that John Stuart Mill's rule utilitarianism therefore here holds water. Then we can also think from Mahatma Gandhi's means end principle. Now here you see that all those who were taking the examination fairly, they are being used as a means, because the ultimate aim of the administration is to attain accreditation, affiliation and gain financially. That's what is the aim of the institution. If that is the aim, then obviously you can understand many people are being used as a means to achieve an end. Gandhiji said that not only the goal matters, but also the path matters that you would follow while you would be treading towards the goal. And finally, we can also defend this by the famous principle that two wrongs do not make a right. One wrong has already been committed. That's the wrong of teaching an unholy association between a lecturer and these two students. Another wrong would be committed if this thing is put under the carpets at all costs. Do you understand that? And two wrongs do not make a right. Further, you would see that this would be gross injustice to all those who would be taking the examination fairly. This could also hurt the career prospects. So friends, this is how we can solve this case study. Well, I open the floor again for your questions. You can ask your question before we move to case study number 9. Keep your questions related to this case study. Okay, Dilshad says, sir, arrangement of thoughts is also a problem while writing case studies. Well, Dilshad, dear, please hold patience, and definitely I'll discuss all these matters at the fag end of the case study. Don't worry, I'll not disappoint you. Vinushri, she says, sir, can we give real life officers as example in case study? Yes, we can, dear. In fact, that would add more credence to our arguments. But while you are making these references, or while you are giving these examples, keep this in mind that you should provide the correct details as far as their office, their cadre, their job, their seniority, the task in which they were involved, and what did they actually do. You should not cook anything around their profile, right? Okay, so I think that is what these are the questions related to case study number 8. That was the second case study. Let's go to case study number 9. This would be the third case study. Look here. An elevated corridor is being constructed to reduce traffic congestion in the capital of a particular state. You have been selected as project manager of this prestigious project on your professional competence and experience. The deadline is to complete the project in next 2 years by 30 June 2021. Perhaps this case study, when it was made, that was the timeline perhaps. Since this project is to be inaugurated by the Chief Minister before the elections are announced in the second week of July 2021. While carrying out the surprise inspection by inspecting team, a minor crack was noticed in one of the piers of the elevated corridor. The piers क्या होते हैं? These are the pillars. आप समझ सकते हो, जैसे मेट्रो के पिलर होते हैं, उसके ऊपर वो ब्रिज सपोर्टेड होता है, जिसपे ट्रैक्स हैं, जिसपे मेट्रो रेल चलती है, तो वो आप समझ सकते हो. These are nothing but the piers. So in one of the piers of the elevated corridor, possibly due to poor material used, you immediately informed the chief engineer and stopped further work. It was assessed by you that minimum 3 piers of the elevated corridor have to be demolished and reconstructed. But this process will delay the project minimum by 4 to 6 months. But the chief engineer overruled the observation of the inspecting team on the ground that it was a minor crack which will not in any way impact the strength and durability of the bridge. He ordered you to overlook the observation of the inspecting team and continue working with same speed and tempo. He informed you that the minister does not want any delay, as he wants the chief minister to inaugurate the elevated corridor before the elections are clear. Now here you see that a crude reference is made to some minister, but no profile has been shown here. But you can make an intelligent assumption that this minister has to do with the department which is indulged in the construction of the elevated corridor, which could be the Minister of Urban Road Transport. Do you understand that? Also informed you that the contractor is a far relative of the minister, perhaps this minister only, and he wants him to finish the project. He also gave you hint that your further promotion as additional chief engineer is under consideration with the ministry. However, you strongly felt that the minor crack in the pier of the elevated corridor will adversely affect the health and life of the bridge, and therefore it will be very dangerous not to repair the elevated corridor. Let's have a look at the questions. First, under the given conditions, what are the options available to you as a project manager? But the question does not say that you have to evaluate the options. So because it's a 250 word kind of arrangement, right? So no need of going into the detailed evaluation of the various options. You can just indicate the most appropriate option. What are the ethical dilemmas being faced by the project manager? What are the professional challenges likely to be faced by the project manager and his response to overcome such challenges? What can be the consequences of overlooking the observation raised by the inspecting team? Now, that's the case study number 3. There are 6 case studies. So this is the 3rd case study. So this case study, which is given in question number 9, let us first highlight the facts of the case. Now, the facts of the case says that you are the project manager who is overlooking the construction of an elevated corridor. Now, this corridor is to be inaugurated by the Chief Minister of the state in the 2nd week, or rather by June, because the 2nd week of July has been selected as the day for the announcement of elections. So you can understand moral code of conduct would be in place. That's why the Chief Minister is to inaugurate this elevated corridor by June. Now look here, what has happened is that the work is on time, and it seems that by June things would be completed, because the year is also mentioned in the question paper, so it's June 2021. But on an inspection which is conducted by an inspecting team, it is found out that one of the piers of the elevated corridor has developed some cracks, probably due to the usage of poor quality of materials. Now look here, that this pier would therefore require some sort of reconstruction, and on further inquiry you discover that not one but there are at least 3 of such piers which require further reconstruction. They have to be demolished and they have to be reconstructed if the health of the bridge is to be ensured going forward. But look here, that when you inform this to the chief engineer, the chief engineer responds in a rather astonishing fashion. He says that you can overlook this damage because it's a minor damage, it's not going to affect the health of the bridge in a major way. Rather, you should keep looking at the completion of the project on time, because the minister of the concerned department has said that it has to be inaugurated by the chief minister on time. And the contractor who has supplied the material for the construction of the elevated corridor also happens to be a distant relative or a relative of the minister concerned, not the chief minister, the minister. Do you understand that? Who has given the order, and the chief engineer is actually acting as the messenger. He is communicating the order to you. If you decide to reconstruct these 3 pairs or pillars, then it would extend the time by 4 to 6 months. So instead of June, it would get completed somewhere around October or December 2021. By that time, you know that elections would be declared. In fact, ho sakta election ho bhi jaye, result bhi aa jaye. Obviously, this is very important for the present government. It wants to showcase this project as a developmental initiative before the public, before it goes into the election process. Do you understand that? So these are the facts of the case. So the question says that what are the options which are available to you as the project manager? What are the ethical dilemmas that you are going to face as the project manager? What would be the professional challenges which you are going to likely face, and how you are going to deal with these challenges? And what would be the consequences of overlooking the observation raised by the inspecting team? But before we go into it, let's highlight the stakeholders. Who would be the stakeholders? First stakeholder would be obviously the project manager. The second stakeholder would be the chief engineer. Third stakeholder would be the department which is responsible for the creation of the elevated corridor. Fourth would be state government. Fifth would be the minister, and you can also add the chief minister, because their political progress, their political capital depends on the performance of this elevated corridor and the construction of this elevated corridor. You can also bring in Government of India and especially Ministry of Road Transport, Urban Mobility related ministries. Then obviously the supreme of all, people of that city who are going to use that bridge on a daily basis. So you can understand that they would also be an important stakeholder. Other stakeholders would be the inspecting team, the arbitration bodies, and the law enforcement agencies. These could be other stakeholders. Again, I told you friends that you can include as many stakeholders as you want, but keep the stakeholders limited so that you can handle all of them properly. तो चलो यहाँ से शुरू करते हैं that what are the options which are available to the project manager. So let us take a look at the various options. So the very first option would be to ignore the crack and continue with the work, or just following the advice of the chief engineer. Second would be stop the work and register a complaint of the issue before the department and try to destroy and reconstruct the 3 pairs. It means bring the matter in front of the department, then destroy the 3 pairs and reconstruct them. Obviously, in this case, you know that the time would extend by 4 to 6 months. It means the deadline would be breached. Then the next option is, again, you know, an escapist option. You must always include it just to add another kind of perspective in the case. It is applying for an extended leave or seek the transfer of the responsibilities. मतलब आप ये बोल सकते हो कि अब मैं और प्रोजेक्ट मैनेजर नहीं रह सकता, तो किसी और को बना दीजिए प्रोजेक्ट मैनेजर, or you can go for an extended leave. Obviously, prima facie itself, it looks very escapist, right? Then think of, you can persuade the chief engineer. You can tell him that what repercussions it might have in the future. You can also write to the minister and the chief minister and the chief secretary, bringing before their notice that what is the actual incident. And that's how you see that you can do a kind of change in attitude of all these people who are directly or indirectly wanting a completion of the project on time. You can highlight that though the costs would be involved here in terms of resources and time for the time being, but in the long run, if the bridge collapses completely, there would be more costs involved. So you can persuade. You can also tell the chief engineer that you must give this order in writing, because that will relieve you from the unethical practices as far as consent is concerned. So you can always show that, and written orders have value in a court of law even when an RTI is filed. You can prepare a detailed report wherein you can highlight the consequences that might happen in the future, and you may write in the noting section that I disapprove of the continuation of the project if these pairs are not improved, they are not repaired. If these piers are not repaired, I do not extend my consent for the continuation of the elevated corridors construction. So you can highlight that, right? It would be fulfilling your duty as the project manager. Obviously, you cannot overturn the orders of your superiors, but definitely you can hold your fist up against any kind of immoral quid pro quo kind of thing. You can also, if nothing of this works, then you can file a formal complaint against the chief engineer before appropriate authorities. You can file this complaint. You can tell the appropriate authorities that the chief engineer is forcing you to do something which is going against public interest. अब समझ लो इन कंप्लेन वम्प्लेन इन चिट्ठियों विट्ठियों का किसी का कुछ नहीं हुआ. नोटिंग ड्राफ्टिंग भी कर लिया आपने, चीफ मिनिस्टर को भी चिट्ठी लिख ली, सब कुछ कर दिया. Then, because your ultimate loyalty is towards the people, you cannot compromise with people's interest as a public servant. That's why you should first play the role of a whistleblower, and you can bring the malpractices out into the public. And there is the Whistleblowers Protection Act also. It means the law encourages whistleblowing if nothing works. So this will not be immoral or unethical. And finally, if suppose you see you cannot do that, then you can directly go to the media and highlight the issue. Media will unearth the matter. Obviously, it would be ultimately in the larger interest of the people, but there are some problems in this step. Generally, students would hold this as a good step. But see, friends, first, going to the media directly without exhausting all the other options would be like showing lack of faith in the system in which you are working. Further, media can sensationalize the matter and create more difficulties, even for those who are committed to completing the project. There must be many engineers who would be fighting it hard day in and day out to do that. And you see that going to the media may also create a kind of culture wherein whenever you are not satisfied with your superior, you may reach out to the media. So the entire prestige of the bureaucracy would be at stake, and bureaucracy would become a fun thing in the eyes of the people, and they would say that their house is not in order. They are always running for the media attention. So this should be the last of the resort. This should be the last refuge. Rather, if you have to choose between whistleblowing and going to the media, whistleblowing would be a better choice. But before that also, you should write the letters. And when you will write the letters to the chief secretary, cabinet secretary, the chief minister, and the other central ministers, obviously see that experience tells that they will look into the matter, they will take cognizance of the matter, and it will be resolved in the larger interest of the people. Who knows, maybe the contractor is actually the person who is the culprit, and the minister is hand in glove in it, and the chief engineer is being threatened by them that if he does not fall in line, then he has to face repercussions. Or maybe the chief engineer is also hand in glove. So whoever it is, obviously when there would be an independent inspection into the matter on the basis of the report that you have prepared and on the basis of the letters that you have written, then it can happen. And whistleblowing, you can understand, this can also be taken as a PIL, and someone can file it before an arbitration tribunal, and judiciary may take cognizance of it and issue an order. But all of that has to be done with caution, by not compromising the rights of the people to have hassle-free urban mobility, and not harassing the honest officers who were otherwise working day in and day out for the success of this project. So these are the various options that are available to you as the project manager, right? Then comes the ethical dilemmas that you would face as the project manager. Let's have a look at these ethical dilemmas. First ethical dilemma would be personal conscience. It means your own understanding of what is right and what is wrong. ये सबसे पहला चीज होगी which would come in conflict with orders given by the superiors. Now look here, the orders that the superiors give, you have to follow it. That is what at least the code of conduct of civil services says. So there is a clash between these two things. That's the first ethical dilemma. The second ethical dilemma would be career progression and self-preservation versus safety and security of the people. That's a very important thing that you have to consider, because ultimately this elevated corridor is to be used by the people, the daily commuters maybe, and if it collapses, then their safety and security would be compromised. This would be undermining of the public trust. And then you can also say that it would be, again, there could be a ethical dilemma between cost of the project. You know that reconstruction of the piers may involve some costs as well, or you can say adhering to the deadline. It means the time limit that has been set for the completion of the project. That would be on one part, and on the other part it would clash directly against engineering and administrative ethics. Well, one golden rule of engineering ethics, especially civil engineering ethics, is that everything should be done for the client or the people. And here you see that the people are the client. They have paid the taxes, and from their tax money it is being constructed. And administrative ethics, which says that you have to stick to the maxim of utilitarianism, maxim of responsibility, accountability, or you have to showcase professional integrity, impartiality, objectivity, transparency, accountability, all of that. Do you understand that? So it would be clashing against administrative and engineering ethics. What? Cost of the project and adherence to the deadline, that whether you would be able to finish it on deadline or not. These are the ethical dilemmas that you will encounter here. The third question is that what are the professional challenges that you would be facing as the project manager, and what kind of response you can give to overcome such challenges. तो आप ऐसे कर सकते हो that you can make a table of professional challenges on one hand and the response that is available to you as the project manager. The challenges could be, first, it could be political pressure. This could be a challenge, or you can say pressure of superiors, like the chief engineer. Then you can say cost pressures, because reconstruction would require some costs as well. Security related challenges. Then growth prospects, because remember that this has been said at the fag end of the case, that if you are you do not do it, then it means you do not reconstruct the damaged piers and you continue with the project and complete it on time, then there is a chance that you might be promoted. Then the challenge is also fighting corruption and nepotism, because remember this certain contractor also happens to be a relative, right? Now, what can be the response for handling these challenges? Well, how they can be handled? First, a detailed report should be prepared by you regarding the entire matter. Ask for written orders by your superiors. So by detailed report, you can counter the political pressure. By written orders, you can counter the pressure from the superiors. Then you can use your domain knowledge and your noting and drafting to highlight the problems. In the detailed report, you would anyhow highlight that if the costs are more in the short term, in the long run, the costs would be reduced, because if the bridge collapses, suppose, or the elevated corridor collapses, then it would amount to reconstruction of it, right? And then in the detailed report, you can also highlight that what kind of problems it may create for the people, for the commuters. It could create health hazards, it could convert into a urban disaster, it could be anything, right? And you should also then order an inquiry committee or an inquiry commission to look into the cases of corruption and nepotism, if there are any. So in this way, you can see that these all things could be countered. Now, not only an inquiry committee should be set up, but it should be then juxtaposed by an independent audit mechanism by the third party. Like this inspecting team, you can set a third party, which is an auditing firm which runs on the principles of corporate ethics, which has high credibility in the eyes of the people, to give a safety certificate for the project. And this will further add credibility to your arguments. This will further add weightage to your arguments. So in this way, you can counter the pressures, but ultimately what you have to do is you have to create an alternative plan of action. You must assign the tasks to the team, and you must ensure that it should be completed as soon as possible. Now, if this thing is highlighted to the superiors and the ministers, obviously they will take cognizance of it, and they are not, you see, insane to go forward overlooking these kind of things. So you have to come up with an alternative plan, you must set a new deadline, and you must ask for extra resources if things are to be completed on deadline. And in that way, you can understand that things would be handled. If on inspection it is found that all the pillars are of risk category, they might collapse under heavy load and with transportation related wear and tear, then obviously your administrative and engineering ethics should not allow you to pass the project as the manager. and then you should completely bring a halt to the operations and highlight the issue to the concerned department and the ministers. If they do not take action, then the whistleblowing and going to the media should become the actions of the last resort. Clear? Now, if we do not do this, we overlook the observation raised by the inspecting team, then what would happen, or what are the possible consequences? That's the last question. First is that you can understand that there would be chance of a future collapse of the corridor, which would affect safety, security, etc. It may cause an increment in the costs. If that thing happens, then it would amount to reconstruction of the entire corridor. Here only 3 piers are to be repaired, but if entire corridor is to be repaired or is to be reconstructed, then the costs would further increase. Then it would promote nepotism and corruption if this thing is overlooked. कौन सी चीज कि जो भी फैक्ट फाइंडिंग या इंस्पेक्टिंग कमिटी है, अगर उन्होंने जो पाया है अगर हम उसको दरकिनार कर दें तो ये भी हो सकता है we will be promoting nepotism and corruption into the system. Further, you see that it may lower the prestige of the government and the administration. They might have to suffer in the long run in terms of their prestige. क्योंकि अगर ऐसा कुछ होता है तो आपको पता है कि जो भी होंगे उस वक्त भले ये गवर्नमेंट रिटर्न कर जाए पावर में या ऑपोजिशन में हो, दैट डिपेंड्स, राइट, बट द पीपल विल लूज द फेथ इन दैट टाइम्स गवर्नमेंट एंड विल क्रिटिसाइज द एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन हेवीली फॉर नॉट टेकिंग appropriate actions, ameliorative actions, rehabilitative actions to overcome this challenge. Then you see it will ultimately cause a loss of faith of the people in the department concerned or in the administration in general. So these are the consequences of neglecting what the inspecting team has highlighted. It would also not allow the development of the bureaucracy as a ethical force in the society and a professional administrative setup. So it would encourage all kinds of malpractices. Do you understand that? So friends, I hope that you have understood that what are the different options which are available, what are the ethical dilemmas that we'll be facing, what are the professional challenges, what could be the responses to handle those professional challenges, and what are the consequences of overlooking the facts which have been uncovered by the inspecting committee. Clear? So that brings us to an end to this case study. If you have any particular questions regarding this case study, you can put forward those questions before we move to case study number 10. Okay, Gaurav has asked, what are the government departments where the report can be sent? Well, Gaurav, the departments could be obviously first the transport department, urban planning department. Reports could also be sent to the local urban bodies, and it could be also deposited into the home ministry of the state administration. Report could also be given to the Central Road Transport Ministry, Ministry of Urban Planning, and the Home Department as well. Because if you are writing to the Cabinet Secretary, you would be interacting with the Home Department as well. So in that way, you can see we can cover the departments to which we can send the reports. Well, it seems that there are no other questions specific to this case study. So maybe you have understood the case study inside out. Let's move to case study number 10, which is the fourth case study. Now it goes something like this. The coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic has quickly spread to various countries. As on May 8th, 2020 in India, 56,342 positive cases of corona had been reported. India, with a population of more than 1.35 billion, had difficulty in controlling the transmission of the coronavirus among its population. Multiple strategies became necessary to handle this outbreak. The Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India raised awareness about this outbreak and to take all the necessary actions to control the spread of COVID-19. Indian government implemented a 55-day lockdown throughout the country to reduce the transmission of the virus. Schools and colleges had shifted to alternative mode of teaching, learning, evaluation and certification. Online mode became popular during these days. Well, who can relate to this more than us? India was not prepared for a sudden onslaught of such a crisis due to limited infrastructure in terms of human resource, money and other facilities needed for taking care of this situation. This disease did not spare anybody, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, or on the one hand, and have not on the other. It means it did not make any discrimination either on social basis or on economic basis, right? Deficiencies in hospital beds, oxygen cylinders, ambulances, hospital staff, and crematorium were the most crucial aspects. It means, you see, that we also, what happened during the second wave, right? There was countrywide, you can say, stress kind of situation. We have lost so many people during the second wave, but you see that nobody imagined, right? Something of this sort would happen to humanity. So you cannot put the blame directly to any one entity. Rather, we all have learned out of this experience and we must be preparing well for any such kind of future onslaught. That is how a balanced mind would look at the issue. An unbalanced mind, a biased, prejudiced mind would always point fingers on one entity or the other for the causation of this kind of huge disaster, which is a health disaster, right? Ambulances, hospital staff, and crematorium were the most crucial aspects. You are a hospital administrator. Now you see, this case, it is more or less like a newspaper report, right? So it showcases that what has happened during the corona crisis. During the first wave, we implemented the 55-day lockdown, and yet you see, we encountered large number of you can say resource crisis kind of situations where there were less number of frontline workers, there was less number of PPE kits, there was no vaccination early, but now there is the vaccination. We've got the second dose, the booster dose as well, but there was nothing of that sort in the beginning. Then there was less ambulances, less hospital beds, crematoriums. We saw all of that, right? And this is primarily because of we were not aware of this thing, or we were not prepared for something like this on one hand, and secondly, we lacked the resources, both human resources as well as physical resources and the financial resources. Our health infrastructure was severely challenged during the corona crisis. Well, that is the fact of the case. You are a hospital administrator in a public hospital at the time when coronavirus has attacked large number of people and patients were pouring into hospital day in and day out. What are your criteria and justification for putting your clinical and non-clinical staff to attend to the patients, knowing fully well that it is a highly infectious disease and resources and infrastructure are limited? Second question says, if yours is a private hospital, whether your justification and decision would remain same as that of the public hospital. So friends, this case puts you into a driver's seat. It says that you are at the helm of affairs in a public hospital. Then what are the criteria on the basis of which you would assign duties to your clinical and non-clinical staff, and what justifications would you extend for such allocation of duties? It further says that if suppose you are not the head of a public hospital, but you are heading a private hospital, then whether the criteria would change or the justifications would change. Well, that is what the case study is asking for. I have already highlighted the facts of the case. The facts are very clear, right? It is talking about what kind of challenges India faced at the time of the coronavirus, especially because of lack of infrastructure and the paucity of resources that we had, financial and human resources. So this is what the case study is all about. Let us take a look at the stakeholders. Now, who would be the stakeholders? First stakeholder would be I, because the case says that you, that's why when you will write the answer, consider it I or me, who is the hospital administrator. Then comes the hospital administration, the executive wing of the hospital. Then the staff of the hospital. Then comes the patients in the hospital. Then comes the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Then comes bodies like Medical Council of India, the pharma companies, both public sector as well as private sector, because they would be supplying the kits, they would be supplying the medicines and all of that. Then obviously, you know, people or society at large. You can also include the state government, the central government, and the district administration, especially the health department. Other stakeholders that you can highlight if you want. Then think of some NGOs, some developmental organizations who were working day in and day out to provide relief, those who were coming with food, those who were coming with medicines, those who were coming with any kind of relief to those who were suffering, right? So they would become the other stakeholders. When we include the staff of the hospital, you can also talk about the frontline workers. It means those who are not employed in the hospital but are playing some role in taking the patient to the hospital. Do you understand that? And you see, when we talk about oxygen cylinders and all of that, there could be many frontline workers. Think of police administration, those who were the law enforcement officers who were engaged in imposing the lockdown and all of that. They would become frontline workers apart from the clinical and non-clinical staff of the hospital. Now, the question says that what would be the criteria on the basis of which you will assign duties to your clinical and non-clinical staff, and provide justifications that what are the grounds, ethical grounds on the basis of which you are allocating them these duties, because the virus does not spare anyone. It does not make any kind of discrimination between the haves and the have-nots, or does not spare people on the grounds of color, caste, creed, religion, etc. So you get that? Now, before we go into that, the question uses one term, clinical and non-clinical staff. Now, who are the clinical staff? The clinical staffs are those who are directly engaged in patients' care or play a role in the direct medicational efforts or direct treatmental efforts. Like say for example, doctors, nurses, even lab attendants, they all become clinical staff. Everybody who is working in a hospital is not a clinical staff. There could be some non-clinical staff as well. Like say for example, those who are engaged in billing, those who are engaged in, say, discharging the drivers, etc., or those who are taking care of the hospital administration, those who are in executive role, not in medical role as such. So they could become the non-clinical staff. But you see, some drivers of the ambulances could become part of clinical staff as well, because they are directly helping in bringing the patient to the operation table or to the hospital bed, as the case may be. But there is a fine line, right? So the same person can play the role of a clinical and non-clinical staff. Suppose a doctor who is also the MD of the institution. So in that way, you can say that his roles are segregated. Anyhow, so the question says that what would be the criteria on the basis of which you would allocate duties. So first thing is the criteria, and the second thing is the ethical justification. तो चलो पहले क्राइटेरिया की बात कर लेते हैं. क्राइटेरिया क्या होना चाहिए? क्राइटेरिया ऑब्जेक्टिव होना चाहिए. क्राइटेरिया सब्जेक्टिव, बायस्ड, प्रेजुडिस्ड या स्टीरियोटिपिकल नहीं होना चाहिए. क्राइटेरिया पार्शियल नहीं होना चाहिए. क्राइटेरिया ट्रांसपेरेंट होना चाहिए. क्राइटेरिया एक्सपर्टीज और एक्सपीरियंस के बेसिस पे होना चाहिए. सो व्हाट कैन बी द क्राइटेरिया? फर्स्ट इज यू हैव टू डू अ allocation on the basis of vulnerability. What kind of vulnerability? Disease vulnerability. आपको पहले ये फाइंड करना पड़ेगा कि कौन लोग हैं जो ज्यादा प्रोन हैं ये वायरस जिनको अटैक कर ली. ऐसे कौन से लोग हैं जो ज्यादा प्रोन हैं इस वायरस के अटैक को. तो ये आप कैसे पता करोगे? थ्रू सेल्फ रिपोर्टिंग. People can tell about their medical history, like suppose someone who suffers from asthma or something like that would be more prone to the coronavirus or something like that, or who have breathing problems and all, they would be more prone, right? So they can self-report their own medical history, and on the basis of which you can know about it, or you can do a rapid test. But obviously you know that more reliance here should be given on self-reporting, because you cannot squander the resources unnecessarily to find out something which should be done on the basis of voluntary reporting. अब यहाँ पर हो सकता है कोई 2-3 लोग झूठ बोल जाएं, but you know that utilitarianism के point of view से अगर आप देखोगे तो फिर भी ये अच्छा है. रैपिड टेस्ट करने में हो सकता है बहुत सारे लोगों को एंगेज करना पड़ जाए जो कि दूसरे तरीके से पेशेंट्स की हेल्प कर सकते हैं. बट एनी हाउ यू शुड कीप द डोर ओपन फॉर बोथ ऑफ देम. जहां पे आपको थोड़ा डाउट आ रहा है वहां पे आप एक रैपिड टेस्ट भी कर सकते हो विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द हेल्थ कंडीशंस ऑफ द स्टाफ, क्लिनिकल और नॉन क्लिनिकल स्टाफ. सेकेंड इज एक्सपर्टीज. दिस शुड बी द सेकेंड क्राइटेरिया. व्हाट इज एक्सपर्टीज? एक्सपर्टीज का मतलब होता है स्किल सेट एंड कॉम्पिटेंस. It means how well versed with the handling of such a kind of situation, and how much is the quality in dealing with such kind of situation. It means it is nothing but professional qualities or professional competence and the skill set. ये दूसरा क्राइटेरिया होना चाहिए. उसके बेसिस पे आप सिलेक्ट करोगे, किसी को भी नहीं सिलेक्ट कर लोगे. Do you understand that? Then third, remember, the principle of equality says like should be treated alike. So those who are more expert, they should be given leadership roles. And the third thing is experience. Experience not on the basis of age. Experience on the basis of professional history or history of handling emergent situations under crisis. Or you can say the fourth quality that you would be looking for is decision making ability, because there cannot be concentration of decision making at such kind of crisis situation. You have to devolve some powers. There has to be some decentralization of decision making. So those who are in better position to take decisions in crisis situation should be given preference, or they should be selected first. Do you understand that? These should be the criteria. When I look at the justifications, you see the justifications could be first from the deontological perspective. Again, you can hold the formula of universal law, formula of humanity. Also, you see that it is our duty to fulfill our tasks. You can also bring in W.D. Ross, who says that every entity has an entity-specific duty. So it's the duty of the hospitals to play a critical role during a health crisis. So it's duty-bound ethics. So you can justify their allocations on the basis of deontological ethical perspective. Then you can also defend it from the utilitarian logic of Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, which says that highest good for the highest number. You can defend in that way. Then you can defend it from the point of view of virtue ethics. Here you can bring in Socrates' principle of justice, Plato's cardinal virtues, and Aristotle's moral exemplar, because you have to play the role of a moral exemplar at this situation if you are the person to whom the society is looking at, because you are the expert, you have the experience, you are to pull the society out of this crisis. Suppose if there is a war-like situation, we will look at the soldiers. So similarly, if it is a health crisis kind of situation, we'll look at our doctors, our non-clinical medical staff, etc. Do you understand that? Then, if we look at from the contractarian ethics, and you bring in scholars like Thomas Hobbes, if you bring in scholars like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and if you think about, say, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, you know that they are all talking about the sanctity of the contract, and the contract is this, that everybody has been assigned a role and they must perform their roles in the time of crisis, and they should not breach the contract. They would be breaching the faith of the people in the administration and in the institution. Then think of the ethics of care. The ethics of care is the feminist ethics, which says that you should exhibit empathy and compassion towards those who are in distress or who are facing some sort of misfortune. So the patients, they require what? Care. This is Carol Gilligan's feminist ethics. You can bring in that logic as well, and you can defend it. Compassion and care, they go hand in hand. Do you understand that? And care flows out of concern and compassion. Then you can also think of the ethics of justice. This is another way by which you can defend your action. Ethics of justice would be Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development stages, wherein the last stage, Kohlberg says that you will take decisions on the basis of universal ethical principles like compassion. You would not restrict yourselves to such decision making where you are guided by a social conditioning. Rather, you would independently think of the issues and you will take the decisions. So Kohlberg says that initially हम ज़्यादा ethical नहीं होते, फिर हम इसलिए ethics follow करते हैं क्योंकि हम society में fit होना चाहते हैं, और उसके बाद एक higher stage आती है जहाँ पर हमको खुद पता होता है कि क्या सही है और क्या गलत है, और हम किसी की approval नहीं चाह रहे हैं उस वक्त. Rather, we are trying to fulfill our duties as a human being. Do you understand that? So ethics of justice. Justice calls this, that at this moment you have to perform your role, right? Or ensure that the rights are given to the people to whom they are due. Then think of administrative ethics. There also you can think of the different maxim of responsibility, maxim of accountability, maxim of compassion, utilitarianism. इस तरीके से आप वहां से भी defend कर सकते हो, justify कर सकते हो अपने choice को. And finally, what about medical ethics? You know that in medicine there is a kind of commitment towards the patients. So from the medical ethics also, you see these all things could be defended. Now, what should you do? How should you actually carry on the task? First thing is that you should provide safety to the staff. And this can be done by giving them protective gears like, say, PPE kits, and vaccinating them or providing vaccination if it is available. At the time period that is being highlighted here, at the time it was still in the process of development, but you can write that, and you can write that if it is available. That's the first thing. Second thing that has to be done is that teams which are self-sufficient should be created, because you know that if somebody acquires the virus, everybody in the team will get affected, and if other team which is pushed in its place is not having all the bases covered, then it would jeopardize the efforts of the hospital administration. मतलब simple words में ऐसे है कि हर टीम ऐसी होनी चाहिए जो अपने आप में complete हो, डॉक्टर हो, नर्स हो, सब कोई हो उसमें. Do you understand that? कि अगर एक टीम डाउन होती है तो दूसरी टीम को वापस लगाया जा सकता है ऐसे केस में. Then you have to do strategic rotation of the staff. You cannot push the staff in a way that they keep on doing the same task over and over without any kind of breaks, because that would have a toll on their mental as well as physical health. Then you can also, apart from strategically rotating the staffs, you can send some motivational messages that would keep the staff pumped up. It would make them realize their moral duties, and you see that they would always feel charged and would be ready to go while they are fighting this deadly disease. You can build some awareness through the do's and don'ts. So the do's and don'ts could be highlighted and repeated more often than not, so that the staff never breach the do's and don'ts if they want to protect themselves. Then there could be pooling of resources. This can be done by creating an interlinking between different public or state-owned hospitals, wherein you see that surplus staff could be taken to some other hospital, and where deficit exists, then you can understand that some staff could be demanded from other hospitals. This could be done by improving the ICT channels which are used for communication. तो इस तरीके से हो सकता है. And then you see that apart from this, you can also ensure that those who are indulged in the provision of services, or they are performing those duties, the frontline workers who are outside the hospital, they must be encouraged. Like suppose if there is some outsourcing going on, then they must be encouraged that if they perform well in this situation, their contracts would be renewed, and there could be also a fresh look into the prices of their contract. So it would give a kind of incentive to them, right? See, models of corporate governance need to be adopted in this situation. So this is what you should do, and this is how you should do. The criteria and the justifications I have highlighted. The second part of the question says that what if you are owning a private hospital, or you are heading a private hospital rather, will your criteria and justifications change? But before you see that, when we'll do all of that I have just discussed, you will be able to build a culture of transparency, objectivity, responsibility and accountability, all of which are required at this crisis situation. अब एक चीज देखो, if you are heading a private hospital, your job as a medical officer does not changes. Your job as a servant providing medical services to the people does not changes. Even if you are in the private regime, you see overall, when you see from the democratic point of view, you are fulfilling the obligations of a social contract. In fact, that is the objective in mind that has been considered while licensing was provided to your hospital. So owning a private hospital does make no difference. वहां पे भी ये सारी चीजें लागू होंगी। वहां पे भी ऐसा थोड़ी ना कि प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल है, आप तो ऐसा होगा कि जिसकी सैलरी ज्यादा है उसको आप पहले प्रेफरेंस दे दोगे, ऐसा नहीं होगा, राइट? यू हैव टू लुक एट द एक्सपर्टीज, एक्सपीरियंस, डिजीज वल्नरेबिलिटी, ऑल ऑफ दैट, राइट? बट प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल के होने पर आप कुछ और एक्स्ट्रा भी कर सकते हो। नाउ दिस एक्स्ट्रा कुड बी डन फॉर द स्टाफ ऑन वन हैंड एंड फॉर द पेशेंट्स। वहां पे भी आप रिसोर्स पूलिंग वगैरह वैसे ही करोगे जैसे गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल में कर रहे थे। इनफैक्ट गवर्नमेंट हॉस्पिटल के साथ भी रिसोर्स पूलिंग कर सकते हो। बट स्टाफ के लिए आप क्या कर सकते हो? फर्स्ट, यू सी, यू शुड प्रोवाइड द प्रोटेक्टिव गियर and vaccination if it is available to the staff at war footing. मतलब you go into business deals immediately with the companies which are producing these materials and provide PPE kits etc. at a war footing. Delay नहीं होना चाहिए इसमें. Further, you can add some incentives. Incentives will give a kind of encouragement to the staff to hold their patients even in the times of crisis and to work towards the attainment of organizational and personal goal. So this would be more of a maximum fusion which would be created in their personal objectives and the goals of the organization. Obviously, while you are doing all of this, you must take care of what is there in the what we discussed with respect to the public hospitals as well. वो सारी चीजें यहाँ पे भी लागू हो जाएंगी, प्लस मैं बता रहा हूँ ये चीजें आप ऐड कर सकते हो। प्लस यू कैन मेक करियर रिपोर्ट्स, progressional reports at this time, and you can highlight this to the staff that your future promotion would also depend on your performance at this time. Because you are owning a private hospital, you can make these decisions. For the patients, what you can do is that obviously being a private hospital, you cannot offer everything free of cost because that would hit the financial sustainability because there is no funding from the government. But you can do this, a graded fee could be taken from the patients and they could be divided into different income groups. And based on their income groups, you see a base fee can be charged. Some of them could be exempted also. But you know, this exemption has to be cross-funded by some surcharge that would be taken from those who are extremely well off and could afford the treatment at no or with no pressure. They can do it, right? So you can do that. So say for example 0% fee, 5% of the actual fee. This would be the base price, right? Do not think of profits at this moment because profits would be generated if the credibility of the institution is established in the eyes of the people. They will be helping the hospital in continuation of its operations by exercising their patronage in the coming future if the hospital performs its duties ethically at the time of their crisis. Clear? So in that way fees could be taken from the hospital, the medical fees. अब एक चीज देखो कि ये आप कैसे फाइंड आउट करोगे? आधार से पता लग जाएगा, तो आधार के थ्रू इनकम ग्रुप जो है वो पता लग जाएगा थ्रू ITR टैक्स फाइलेशन. You can go to the website and you can find out that the non-clinical staff should be engaged in this. Further, if suppose this cannot be done and you cannot reduce the price and you cannot cut away the profits, then at least you can offer some EMI facilities, and EMIs should be no cost EMIs. नो कॉस्ट EMI का मतलब होता है उसमें कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं लगेगा. जो भी आपकी EMI जैसे भी तोड़कर आएगी उसमें कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं लगेगा आपके EMI पे, तो आप वो फैसिलिटी भी एक्सटेंड कर सकते हो. एंड यू कैन गिव सम हॉलीडेज ऑल्सो विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू EMI honoring, like say for example if it's a 6-month EMI but you can give a 9-month window so that you can understand that there could be some sort of arrangement made by the patients to oversee their obligations. Or what you can do is, obviously, will this not all ensure that there is some sort of financial challenge for the hospital administration? Well, definitely. For that, you can write to the Ministry of Health. You can also contact some NGOs some SHGs, some developmental organization, enlightened citizens, and you can always ask for crowdfunding if you want, obviously by upholding proper principles of transparency, objectivity and openness. On the basis of this, you can do some crowdfunding as well, जिसके through आपको कुछ पैसा मिल जाएगा जिससे आप help कर सकते हो. So these should be the other things that you can do if you are heading a private hospital, right? Apart from instead of a government hospital, if you are heading a private hospital, ये आप कर सकते हो उसके साथ. Do you get it? So friends, this is how we can solve this case study. Let's move to the next case study. But before I go into this case study number 11, which is the penultimate case study, let me take the questions that you have in and around this case study. Devita says, do we need to mention these departments in our answers? Well, Devita, you can do that, dear. Obviously, it will add more value to your argument, but even if you miss that, it will not hurt you in terms of marks. So, one or two departments would be enough. No need of highlighting every department because it is not expected from you at this moment that you would be knowing everything about the department because you're not into the services, right? Anup says, there was one similar case study discussed by Sir before mains. It's on YouTube. Okay. So yes, I have discussed many of such case studies in my class of 100 case studies, where I thoroughly cover 100 case studies in the class and make the students write all those case studies. But yes, definitely due to the pandemic, some of those exercises got hit and I had to conduct it online. But yet, when we interact in the offline mode, I make the students to write before my eyes, and therefore you see that all those who have done that even in the online mode, they might have benefited enormously because these case studies might not be appearing very difficult. I have asked several lengthy case studies, different dimension related case studies. ये तो बहुत unidimensional तरीके के हैं, mostly case study 2-3 dimension के ही आए हैं. इस बार case study वाला जो section है वो थ्योरी वाले पोर्शन से रिलेटिवली थोड़ा आसान है. मैं इसको आसान नहीं बोलूंगा. नेवर से यूपीएससी पेपर एज सिंपल. डू नॉट फॉल इनटू दैट ट्रैप, बट इट इज मॉडरेटली डिफिकल्ट एंड रिलेटिवली सिंपल व्हेन कंपेयर्ड टू द theoretical portion. Now friends, let us go to case study number 11. Now what does this case study says? So it says, a reputed food product company based in India developed a food product for the international market and started exporting the same after getting necessary approvals. The company announced this achievement and also indicated that soon the product will be made available for the domestic consumers with almost same quality and health benefits. Accordingly, the company got its product approved by the domestic competent authority and launched the product in Indian market. The company could increase its market share over a period of time and earn substantial profit both domestically and internationally. However, the random sample test conducted by inspecting team found the product being sold domestically in variance with the approval obtained from the competent authority. On further investigation, it was also discovered that the food company was not only selling products which were not meeting the health standard of the country, but also selling the rejected export products in the domestic market. This episode adversely affected the reputation and profitability of the food company. Well, the case is very simple. If we highlight the facts of the case, it says that there is this particular food product company which is based in India, which is primarily producing food products for international markets and has good export base. But it also decided to launch the same product in India and got permission from the competent authority. Now, these authorities could be like India's case, FSSAI or something like that, right? So, got the permission from the competent authority. But one day what happened that a random inspection highlighted that the food product which was sold in the domestic market was in variance with its international counterpart. Further, it was discovered that those products which were rejected for exports were dumped into the domestic market. Obviously, it could have health ramifications because this is food, and you can understand that therefore it is very sensitive topic. Obviously, this would hurt the profitability and it will also hurt the credibility of the company. Now, the questions are something like this. It says, what action do you visualize should be taken by the competent authority against the food company for violating the laid down domestic food standard and selling rejected export products in domestic market? And second question is, what course of action is available with the food company to resolve the crisis and bring back its lost reputation? The third question is, examine the ethical dilemma involved in the case. So friends, you see that there are three questions primarily. The first question is action to be taken by the competent authority against the food company for violating the guidelines or the domestic requirements. Second, it says right course of action available for the food company to restore its prestige. And the third option says, or rather the third question says, what are the ethical dilemmas involved in this case? Let us start with the stakeholders. And I told you already the facts of the case, so you can just think of those facts. Who are the stakeholders? First, obviously, the food product company. Second, the administration, or you can think of the management and staff of that company. Third, the competent authority. This is that authority which provides approval for or gives licenses. You can think of something like that. Then the food processing ministry and department. Then comes the people, or you can think of the society at large. These are mostly the stakeholders that you can think of, but the other stakeholders that you can include is obviously the Ministry of Health, including the health departments, the competitors of the company, because you know that the company is indulging into some sort of malpractices, and this can erode the faith of the people from processed foods altogether. So some companies which are otherwise fairly conducting their business, they might also be at the receiving end of such wrath of the people. So that's why you see that the competitors also have some interest in the outcome of this case study. Let us now take a look at that what actions should be taken by the competent authority against the company for violating the laid down domestic food standard and selling rejected exported products in the domestic market. All right. Now, the first thing that the competent authority should do is it should issue an order to all the wholesalers plus retailers who are selling this food product in the domestic market to withhold their sales immediately. Do not push any further product into the market so that the situation does not aggravate. Second is that an inquiry committee comprising of experts of food product and experts of law should be made to look into the matter. They must conduct trials or inspections or tests both at the market level and at the factory level and provide a report. Now, on the basis of this report, what should be done? Third, a show cause notice should be issued to the food company, food product company, that if the charges are sustained, then this show cause notice should be issued, and the notice should go like this: highlight why action should not be taken against you. You have violated the guidelines of the competent authority. Do you understand that? Then, not only this, because this is more of a plenary action. Fourth, all the food products should be recalled or destroyed, whatever is administratively and financially more feasible. हो सकता है रिकॉल करने में बहुत ज्यादा पैसा लग जाए, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव कॉस्ट बढ़ जाए, तो जहां जहां पर है वहां पर आप लोगों को भेजकर या रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स भेजकर पूरा प्रोडक्ट डिस्ट्रॉय करवा सकते हैं. Obviously, with the help of government order, nobody would take risk in and around food products, right? Then you can impose a monetary fine on the company and ask the company to pay compensation to those who got affected by the use of this food product, if any, if there are any such people. Then you see, conduct further investigations into the matter, and if it comes to light that this is a deliberate effort and this is done with some surreptitious intention in mind, with the idea of making profit at the cost of public health, then initiate criminal proceedings against those who took the decision, especially the directors of the company, and put a moratorium. Moratorium means temporary ban. It's not a permanent ban, a temporary ban on the company, allowing it to put its house back in order, because there must be many people who would be dependent on the company, right? So their employment would be compromised if you give a knee-jerk reaction to the activities of the company. And if suppose the company fails to take any concrete action, then the last step should be to cancel the license of the company and blacklist the company. But that should be the last action and should not be the first choice, right? Now, this is what the competent authority should do. In that way, the competent authority would gain a kind of acceptance in the eyes of the people, and those competitors who were fairly doing their business, they would also feel good about it, and those who had such kind of intentions in mind, they would be alarmed by this kind of action by the competent authority. तो ये आप कह सकते हो. Now let us talk about that. What is the right course of action that is available to the food company, or the food company should adopt to resolve the crisis and to bring back its lost reputation, right? First, the food company should recall all its products, irrespective of their quality at the moment, all its products from the market and from the wholesalers. In fact, even before this could be actually the second step. The first step should be issue an unconditional apology because you have to have faith and you have to have fortitude under such kind of situation, right? You have to have faith in the people that the people is going to forgive you, and you have to have fortitude to say yes to something which you have done which is wrong. Then recall all the products from the market and the wholesalers. Then conduct in-house inspection, and you can also do some clinical, or rather, I should not use the word clinical, but you can do some trials of the product, that whether it is meeting the standards or not. Then accountability should be fixed upon all those who were involved in the wrongdoings. Then there should be a change in the top administration. Even though the top administration might not be involved hand in glove, yet they are morally responsible for the failure. Then pay compensation to all those who got affected by the bad product, if there are any monetary compensation and compensation of other kind. Then apart from this, what could be done is that then voluntarily declare the standards that you would be following and call for independent agencies. What kind of agencies? National and international agencies, to conduct their trials for their, you can say, for their sake or for their own approval. And these trials could be conducted at market level, at the factory level, or at the warehouse level, where the wholesaler is storing the food product. Then adopt some rules, state of the art rules and guidelines which are followed internationally, or international best practices with respect to food processing, right? If these things are done, then you see that the company might be able to recover some of its lost prestige, but it might not recover all of it immediately, but in the long run, obviously, it would recover some of its lost prestige. And if it never does anything of that sort, then definitely it will recover all its prestige in the very long term, right? But you know that if somebody has done something wrong, then time is actually what will decide that whether it was an accidental mistake or it was an experiment, and the idea was to see that whether this thing could be continued or not, right? Now let us look at the third part of, or the third question attached with this case study, which says highlight the ethical dilemmas involved in the case. Now the first ethical dilemma that we can think of is the rule of law versus the reputation of the company. Obviously, you can understand that if you are flouting the guidelines of the competent authority, you are violating the rule of law. So that's the first ethical dilemma. Obviously, you should go with this rather than that thing. Then the second ethical dilemma could be, say, it could flow from this, right? Reputation of the company, self-preservation or protection of the economic rights of the company versus public health. And you know, in a welfare state, public health should always get primacy over this self-preservation. General common rights, they override the individual rights. At least that is what the utilitarian logic says, and it finds expression in the Indian Constitution, right? The makers of the Indian Constitution were also inspired by the ideas of John Locke. And then you see the other would be business sentiments because you see that if very strong action is taken against the company, then other prospective investors might get frightened, even though they have no aim of indulging into any malpractice. But if very strong action is taken which leads to closure of the company, then people would be very averse to invest, right? Because they might feel that if something happens by us, even out of ignorance, such kind of action could be taken against us too. What's this? The duty of the state. Duty of the state towards the different stakeholders, towards the people, towards the other competitors. So these are the ethical dilemmas that we can highlight. And here also you see that obviously business sentiments need to be protected. That's why the duty of the state should not be to indulge into an action which is a knee-jerk reaction. Rather, it should be more of an organized action. And I told you that what kind of these action could be when we were discussing the steps that the competent authority should take. Should का मतलब होता है ये लेना ही पड़ेगा अब. It's mandatory, right? There is no option of moving away from it. So friends, this was case study number 11, and before we move to case study number 12, please put forward your question in and around case study number 11. This case study is our last case study number 12. But before that, you can ask your question regarding the case study number 11. All right. So I'm still waiting for the questions. It seems that there are no questions related to this case study. Okay then, let's move to the last case study. Now, the last case study goes something like this. It says, Pawan is working as an officer in the state government for the last 10 years. As a part of routine transfer, he was posted to another department. He joined in a new office along with 5 other colleagues. The head of the office was a senior officer, conversant, or you can say is very well versed with the functioning of the office. As a part of the general inquiry, Pawan gathered that his senior officer carries the reputation of being difficult and insensitive person, having his own disturbed family life. Initially, all seemed to go well. However, after some time, Pawan felt that the senior officer was belittling him and at times unreasonable. Whatever suggestions given or views expressed by Pawan in the meetings were summarily rejected, and the senior officers would express displeasure in the presence of the others. It became a pattern of boss style of functioning to show him in bad light, highlighting his shortcomings and humiliating publicly. It became apparent that though there are no serious work-related problems, shortcomings, the senior officer was always on one pretext or the other, would scold and shout at him, it means Pawan. The continuous harassment and the public criticism of Pawan resulted in loss of confidence, self-esteem and equanimity. Pawan realized that his relations with his senior officer are becoming more toxic, and due to this, he felt perpetually tensed, anxious and stressed. His mind was occupied with negativity and caused him mental torture, anguish and agony. Eventually, it badly affected his personal and family life. He was no longer joyous, happy and contented even at home. Rather, without any reason, he would lose his temper with his wife and other family members. The family environment was no longer pleasant and congenial. His wife, who was always supportive to him, also became a victim of his negativity and hostile behavior. Due to harassment and humiliation suffering by him in the office, comfort and happiness virtually vanished from his life. Thus, it damaged his physical and mental health. Well, again, a straightforward kind of case study. It says that Pawan is a public servant or is an officer in the government for the last 10 years. He has been recently transferred to a new department along with 5 colleagues, but the behavior of his boss in the new department or in the new wing of the administration is not very fine. He criticizes Pawan unnecessarily. It is no constructive criticism, but he tries to belittle him in front of full public glare. So Pawan is losing his confidence and Pawan is on the brink of depression. all of this is translating into his bad behavior in home with his wife and other members of the family. And because of it, you see that there is no peace and tranquility in office or at home. So what are the questions which are associated with it? Questions are, what are the options available with Pawan to cope up with the situation? So the first question says, options for Pawan under this situation. Second, what approach Pawan should adopt for bringing peace, tranquility and congenial environment in the office at home and home. It means what Pawan can do to bring peace at office and in home. As an outsider, now the third question is directed towards you specifically. What are your suggestions for both boss and subordinate to overcome this situation and for improving the work performance, mental and emotional hygiene? And the last question goes like this. In the above scenario, what type of training would you suggest for officers at various levels in the government offices? So let us take a look at what this case is all about. Now, you see that if I have to summarize this case in 3 sentences, I would say first, it is a case that deals with poor work culture. That's the first thing. Second, it's a case wherein people have low emotional intelligence, both Pawan and his officer. And you see that this is a case where you do not find any work-life balance. It means problems of work are affecting personal life. So this is how we can summarize this case. Now let us take a look at who are the stakeholders in this case. So let's take a look at the stakeholders. The stakeholders would be obviously first Pawan, second his family members, because the case says wife and other family members, so you can write his family members, then his boss, his colleagues, the department for which Pawan is working, and the public at large. Why? Because the public must be interacting with the department. It's a public service department, right? So bad behavior of the staff or hostile attitude of the staff towards each other or lack of satisfaction might translate into bad delivery of public services. So public also become an important stakeholder in this. We can limit the stakeholders up to this point. Now, what are the options that are available to Pawan, or that are available with Pawan to cope up with this situation? Now, the first option that Pawan has is ignore the boss and continue his work. Obviously, this is not going to help in the long run. Short run, this might help, but in the long run, this is not going to help because the boss will pull up Pawan on one pretext or the other, and he will further derail into the path of depression. Second, Pawan may adapt to the new realities. Now again, this might not be a very good step. Why? Because it would come at the cost of self-esteem. And when something comes at the cost of self-esteem, it is not durable. So that is another thing. Third is Pawan can seek a transfer. Again, this would be escapism. Though he would be at peace, but there is no guarantee that nothing of that sort is going to happen in the new office as well. Then Pawan can build a consensus with other members of the office and take on the boss. Again, this might look a bit attractive, but this is again a foolish folly. Why? Because you see that this would undermine the work, or who would actually suffer? Not the boss, but the people who are looking at the administration for getting certain public services. Then fifth could be file a formal complaint against the boss to the higher authorities so that they can take cognizance of the matter and take appropriate actions. And the sixth step that would be the most effective step here, in fact, a combination of fifth and sixth could be the most effective steps. It is Pawan should first exhibit emotional intelligence and try to resolve the matter amicably. And if this does not work, then he can file the complaint, because nobody should compromise with their self-esteem. So these are the options which are available to Pawan under this situation. Now, the second question says, or the next question, it says that the approach that Pawan should adopt for bringing peace, tranquility, and congenial environment in the office and in home. तो देखो हम इसको divide कर लेते हैं. First home and then office. See, people can lose their patience, right? We are all humans. We can all lose our patience. But what makes us actually sound is when do we realize that we have erred, and do we have the courage to apologize? Then that is what makes us human. So first, what Pawan should do is he should apologize to his wife and other family members for the way he has been reacting of late. Second, he should discuss the matter in detail with the family members. Because you see that when you talk, you are taking the first step towards a resolution of a crisis. Nothing exists in the world which cannot be resolved through dialogue. So you can do this. Then you can seek the support, or Pawan can seek the support of his wife and family members in this crisis. See, the case study itself says that his wife has always been supportive to Pawan. So obviously she would be more than willing to support Pawan in this situation. And then he should give an assurance to the family members that he would keep work-life balance and he would not allow work-related disturbances to overflow into his personal life. So this is what he should do with respect to home, to bring peace, tranquility, and congenial environment there. What can he do with respect to the office? First, Pawan should observe the behavior of his boss towards other employees or his colleagues, especially those who have joined with him. Remember, there were 5 other people who have joined with Pawan, So Pawan should first observe the behavior of the boss, that whether he's targeting everyone or he is his sole favorite as far as targeting is concerned. Then he should try to find out the real reason for the boss's displeasure with him. Third, he should talk to the boss. He should say that though I'm open to constructive criticism, I would not be willing to surrender my self-esteem and how it is affecting him. He can also tell the boss that I'm willing to support you and I'm committed towards the office, but this is becoming too often and too heavy for me to tolerate. So that's what he can tell the boss. Then you see that Pawan can complain against his boss to the higher authorities. Now see, we cannot assume this Pawan cannot be wrong in any way. That would again be an extreme assumption. Pawan can also be wrong in many ways, and what he feels is actually targeting could be genuine criticism, but maybe the language is problematic with the boss, right? So he's focusing on the language of the boss rather than the criticism. So this could be a miscommunication kind of case as well. So he should file a formal complaint, and then he should wait for the reply, right? This is what he can do for bringing peace in the office. The next question says, as an outsider, suggestions for both boss and subordinate that you can give to improve their work performance, mental and emotional hygiene, right? So again, we can divide the suggestion for the boss and for the subordinates. Now, when it comes to the boss, the suggestions that we can give is, first, be a moral exemplar. A moral exemplar is one who leads by his actions, who is an example, a model for others to follow and emulate. Others want to be like him. So be like that. You are the leader of the organization. So be a moral exemplar. Do not lose your balance of mind so often. Do not be fickle-minded, right? Rather, have some gravity in your thought. The first suggestion. Second suggestion is criticize constructively, but do not belittle anyone, because you do not have the moral right of doing that. Now, belittling means completely dismissing someone in full public glare. It means the sole aim is to destroy that person's image in front of everyone. So do not do that. Then you can say that you should develop emotional intelligence. Try to read and analyze and comprehend your emotions in others. Try to derive information from that and take decisions accordingly. Then you can also highlight that you can tell to the boss that if he is facing some personal problems, he should consult a psychiatrist. You see, in our country, consulting a psychiatrist is a kind of taboo, right? लोगों को लगता है कि पागल हो रहा है इसलिए psychiatrist के पास जा रहा है. But it is not such. Like you need a doctor for your body, you might need a doctor for your mental health as well. Mental health, in fact, is an important constituent. Anybody, a healthy person who is physically healthy, might be facing some mental health problems as well. So consulting a psychiatrist might actually help the boss, which would further translate into a good congenial environment in the office. So these are the suggestions that you can give the boss. As far as the subordinates are concerned, the suggestions could be, first, show dedication and commitment. I mean, do not fall into the game of office politics, because that will take you away from your goal. Second is that do not compromise on self-esteem. Never do that. Then develop emotional intelligence. Then learn detachment to create work-life balance. Practice introspection. Introspection is like looking into yourself. It's like soul searching, right? Find out that if there is anything wrong with you or not. Then take steps to protect your self-esteem, but as per law and ethics, You have to be ethically correct before you raise a finger upon anyone. So these are the things that you can tell to the subordinates. Now the last question says that what type of training do you suggest for officers at various levels in government offices? Right. Now the first training is sensitization, trainings that promote sensitization of the workforce. People should see each other from their perspective, and this is based on the value of empathy and compassion. Then training to work in a team. This is based on the value of team spirit. Learn interdependence. Remember what Erik Erikson said? And that is in fact featured in this question paper as well. Then training that improves communication or interpersonal communication, because communication gap or bad communication can even destroy the well-intentioned goals, right? Then there could be some training for relaxation, like there could be a trip, there could be yoga, there could be any kind of practice which brings some sort of relaxation of mind, right? Training that enables you to develop this detachment thing, like how Swami Vivekananda would say, the ethics of renunciation. Now, who mastered this? Perhaps Vardhaman Mahavir, Gautam Buddha, Swami Vivekananda, Swami Dayanand Saraswati. They are the people, Adi Shankaracharya. They are the people who mastered this practice of renunciation, detaching themselves. When you detach, you go inside, you do the soul searching, and you come out victorious. And finally, you can suggest for some ethical, value-based training, in which apart from skill development, there should also be a focus on the code of ethics. In that way, you can cope with these kind of situations. So friends, I hope that this thing is crystal clear to each and every one of you. So let me see the questions that you have in and around this case study, and then I will go to some of the general questions that you have asked so far. Okay, Gaurav says, sir, can I draw a flowchart to address the stakeholders of the case study to save the space limit? Yes, definitely, Gaurav, you can do that. In fact, that is suggested also at times, right? You can draw a flowchart, or you can draw a box. In that you can highlight the stakeholders. Sukriti says, will it impress the examiner if I write and underline the name of the thinkers and the theory related? Yes, you can do underlining, or you can change the ink if you want, but only when the point is carrying a lot of weight. Do not do it, or do not overdo it. If you overdo it, then the charm will be lost. Meera says, sir, can a story or similar scenario related to the situation introduced as an example to quote in the answer, or will it complicate the answer? Well, you can do that, Meera, but again you have to see that the question or the story or the anecdote that you are incorporating should be in tune with the demand of the questions. It should not be just haywire, otherwise it would be squandering of space and time, and you would be losing marks also, because you would be writing something which is totally irrelevant. Jaya says, sir, how to avoid the political inclination or any type of bias while attempting a case study? Well, you see, This can be done only when you practice ethics in life as well, and you understand the ethical principles that a bureaucrat or a potential bureaucrat must possess. For this, you must evaluate your thinking from the outside. You should think out of the box, right? You should not get carried away. You should always entertain the other's position and then look into the merits of the argument rather than the charm of the speaker or the caste or any other kind of biasness that you might have. You should come out of your prejudices and stereotypes. Then only you can have this kind of thing. Ina says, seems UPSC is inspired from Bollywood movies. As a last case study seems, okay, well, no comments on that because I have not gone through that movie, but it seems, maybe, who knows, right? Because cinema is the reflection of the society, and society is reflected in the cinemas. I hope you understand that. Nirvan says, okay, he says is expressing his gratitude. Then Shreya says, perfectly explained. Arjun says, is there any particular format for writing? Well, I'll be discussing that. In fact, that's also a question by some previous student. Okay, so it seems that there are no further questions. So friends, let me give you a broad caricature that you should take with you while you are writing the case studies. Well, it is not necessary that all these will be covered in every case study, but more or less you would see in all the case studies, you can use this as a model format और जिससे आप कुछ लिख सकते हो. First is, you should highlight the facts of the case, and you should do that in 2 to 3 lines. It is not necessary to write it in the answer, but you can just highlight it in the question paper or in your mind, or you can jot it down somewhere in the rough page or something like that. Then you should identify the stakeholders. Now, in advanced writing, you can define the stakeholders as generic and specific. Specific are those which are directly mentioned in the case, generic, otherwise related to the case. Primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, etc. Stakeholders, depending upon how much they are getting affected by the case. But again, this would be an unnecessary exercise, especially when you're writing the answer. But in understanding the case study writing, this is very important. Then you can highlight the values which are involved in the case. Then you see that these values often clash with each other, like rule of law is a value, right? Versus self-preservation, another value. So they may clash against each other. So when values clash, you can highlight them as the ethical dilemmas. Though ethical dilemmas could also be clash of interests or rights. So you should also then identify the interests. How can you identify the interest? You can look at the stakeholders and identify what is their primary interest in the case. And on the basis of this, you can create the dilemma when two interests clash. That is nothing but the conflict of interest. Like say, for example, you are heading the selection committee of a certain examination where your own son or your own brother or your own sister is appearing. So that would again would be a clash of interest or conflict of interest, right? Once you do that, then you should identify the qualities needed in the protagonist. Protagonist is actually the hero of the case study. You could also be identified as the hero of the case study. तो वहाँ पर भी आप देख लेना the qualities that are needed in the protagonist. Like say for example, if a civil servant, then guardian of public trust, all those kind of things. तो ये आप highlight करने की कोशिश करना case study में. ज़रूरी नहीं ये सब कुछ आप answer में लिखो. I'm telling you again and again. But you have to identify them in the case study in order to evolve a good case study answer. Then you have to identify the responsibilities of the protagonist. Qualities And responsibilities are different. Responsibilities are obligations, duties, whereas qualities are the traits of character. So ये दोनों highlight करने की कोशिश करना. Then try to find out the various options. और जब options की बात होती है तो देखो 4 तरह के options mostly UPSC के स्टडीज में आते हैं. एक तो पहला है इग्नोर, दूसरा है अडेप्ट, तीसरा है फ्ली, इट मींस एस्केपिंग, एंड देन इज कोर्स करेक्शन, और यू कैन से रिफॉर्म, समटाइम्स रेफर्ड टू आल्सो एज चेंज. और मोस्टली यही वाला होता है ऑप्शन जो आपको चुनना होता है. Then you have to evaluate the options. Evaluation of the option means the merits and the demerits of different options. Then comes choosing the most appropriate option. Once you choose the most appropriate option, then you have to defend your choice. That you can do by giving ethical justification. And when you are providing ethical justification, keep this in mind that you are using scholars and thinkers. If you want a good summary of scholars and thinkers, you can go through that 70 thinkers, 70 thought book which I have compiled, where I have tried to provide a summary of all the thinkers. You can just go through that book and that will help you. Then ethical justification should be from all angles: consequentialist ethics, non-consequentialist ethics, virtue ethics, contractarian ethics, ethics of care, ethics of justice. So it should be from all dimensions. It should also be from Western ethical thoughts and Indian ethical thoughts. Like you should use concepts like nishkama karma, which is very important for the civil servants, which is when you perform your duties without bothering about the results that you would face. And finally, you should draw a conclusion. Now, when you give the conclusion, keep this in mind that it should be how the conclusion should be. Conclusion has its own qualities, right? So the conclusion which you would be providing, it should be socially acceptable. First thing, the conclusion should also be economically viable. It should be politically possible. It should be legally permissible. It should be environmentally sustainable. It should be technologically achievable. It should be culturally admissible. And it should be ethically justifiable. So this is what you have to keep in mind while you are giving your conclusion, right? So friends, I think that, Lipu says, sir, please help for essay 2. So obviously I am thinking of that, but let us see how the schedule pans out, right? Preet says, can we write all these things in our answer if time and space permits? Why not, Preet? You can do that, dear. But obviously do not squander unnecessarily and do not move away from the question. कहीं पर आप देखोगे क्वेश्चन एक ही होता है, अंडर सच सर्कमस्टांसेस व्हाट विल यू डू, तो वहां पे आप सब कुछ लिख सकते हो. बट अगर क्वेश्चन में ही 4 क्वेश्चन दिए हुए हैं, जैसे हमने बहुत सारे केस स्टडी देखे जिसमें 4-4, 5, पवन वाला केस स्टडी था, उसमें बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस थे, अब 250 वर्ड्स है, आप ये सब लिखने बैठोगे तो वो क्वेश्चन तो बिल्कुल ही छूट जाएगा. So you have to keep your questions limited to what the examiner has, or your answers, arguments limited to what the examiner has asked. Do not move disarray. Friends, I feel that you have benefited from this open session on GS paper 4, where we discussed and analyzed the ethics 2021 question paper. If you want a final word from me, I would say that this paper was moderate to difficult. It was mostly on the moderate side rather than on the difficult side. The case studies were relatively easier than the theoretical portion. But again, if you have not managed time well, if you have not done enough practice, like if you have not done any test series or some answer writing with respect to ethics, then you will face challenge in the examination hall. First is you have to have a thorough command over this subject, and fifth unit is the key which will help you in understanding the bits and pieces of this subject. That will definitely put you in good stead. Then you should have good command over the other concepts, especially ethics in public administration and ethics, those portions which emanate from the social psychology like attitude, aptitude, foundational values, human values, and your emotional intelligence. You must have good command over these. And finally, on answer writing. Answer writing is the key. If you're not practicing enough in ethics, then definitely, even if you read and revise recursively, you will not be able to replicate your learning in the answer sheet. If you ask me which is the GS paper which has the highest rate of return, I would say it is none but GS paper 4. I hope that you all have benefited. Thank you, all of you, for your patience, and I will meet you again in some other discussion, in some other class. Till that time, take good care of yourself. Thank you very much.